good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
Sheriff, you're not cheating on your wife if you eat my lemon square.
Your lemon squares taste like ass.
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking extreme bullying. We're talking absent parents. And we're talking hunting for men in the underpass. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking extreme bullies getting extremely ripped apart in an extreme pool.
Oh my god, it's honestly one of my favorite scenes in all of horror. I love it.
It is real good. Although, Joe, I mean, like, full confession, I get the artistry behind the scene and why we don't see a lot of it, but isn't the little gay boy inside of you like, I want to see these fuckers, like the fear in their faces as they get ripped apart?
Oh, I don't know. There is something so satisfying about just seeing a head pop into a pool and thinking, oh, I don't need to see it because I can imagine it, and it is hella satisfying.
Yeah, but I want to see their faces. Anyway, but that's going to remove all the artistry from the film. So everyone, we are discussing Let the Right One In. Of course, the adaptation of the book, not the American remake. We are doing the Swedish original, and for good fucking reason, because it is awesome.
It is, and we're not going to come down hard on the American remake because I have rewatched this recently, in fact, because, gentle plug, in case people don't know, I have a YA podcast, and because this is an adaptation, I just covered it on that. So, folks, if you want to hear a little bit more background about the book and also the American film, you can go and listen to that, but I will say this is easily one of the best American remakes of a foreign horror film.
Now, question. A, you're a better man than I could not be doing fucking, like, book adaptation, American remake of adaptation, all this shit. And did you plan these to be, like,
100%. Okay. Because I was like, I don't want to have to rewatch these movies or try to read this book and remember it in 6 months.
That's fair. That's totally fair. But you know what? In case you did forget things, why don't we bring in our guests? So, everyone, you may know them as the host of The Beauty of Horror, a podcast dedicated to exploring the unsettling beauty found in the horror genre. You may have also read their work at Morbidly Beautiful, We Are Horror, and Film Cred. Please welcome Chandler Bullock.
Thank you. What a wonderful little intro. You even got my whole description of my podcast. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I know. You gotta tell people, if people just say, oh, he does The Beauty of Horror, then what is that?
yeah, no, but you nailed it. You said it exactly, and it's so nice to hear somebody else say it for once instead of my voice. So thank you for this.
You're so welcome. Oh my God.
But also, we should note that Bo, Trace, and I have guest starred on your podcast because it is that amazing. So, yeah, Trace got to talk about a really horrifying film, Dead Girl.
Dead Girl.
And then I got to talk about a beautifully amazing film, which is Don't Look Now.
I was like, I feel like I know the answer to this one. Of course, it's Don't Look Now. The movie that I still have not seen.
Really? Oh, yeah, come on.
Yeah.
He's never in the right mood.
But okay, even without having seen it, both of you can agree that you probably have to be in a certain mood to watch Don't Look Now.
Well, no. Trace, I watched it on a train, so I can't really say that with confidence, I'm afraid.
I just want it to be a thing where I don't feel like it's work, or I'm just like, you know what, I am going to sit down and bask in the glory of this movie.
Okay, let's try one thing, and then we'll get back to Let the Right One In. Yes, that's what people have actually tuned in for. Trace, it has one of the most sexually explicit sex scenes in all of film history. Shouldn't that enough? That's enough of a sell for you.
Look, I know the movie's all about themes and the color red and guilt and murder and sex and whatever, but I think it's because I know the ending, and I'm like, I just don't want to sit through 2 hours when I know what happens at the very end.
The end to me is almost the least important thing. It's just kind of the like, and I'm going to kick you in the face now that you're already down. That's all that is to me.
That's fair. Well, okay, so a movie we've all seen that we all really like is Let the Right One In. And Chandler, you really, really wanted to come on to this episode for this film specifically. Why is that?
Well, so a while back, I think it was Podcast of the Damned who put out a tweet of asking, like, what are your top 5 vampire movies? And I had Let the Right One In as number 1. And I remember Joe kind of responding to that almost immediately about like, oh, you don't say. And yeah, when I heard that the opportunity to talk about this on your show was opening, I mean, I had to jump on it, right? It is my number 1 vampire movie for a reason. So back when this came out in 2008, I was very impressionable. I was roughly around 22 or something like that. In a foreign country, kind of getting used to being around just an environment I wasn't really used to. And then I see this kid who I could really relate to. Just, granted, he's a 12-year-old and I was a 22-year-old, but it got a lot of flashbacks from my own home. And to see it like a Swedish film doing that, it's just incredible to me. And I also felt at the time that vampire movies were kind of, I don't know, they just weren't doing it right anymore, in my feeling. 30 Days a Night was really cool. But all in all, it was a little played out. So to have something so refreshing like that just really piqued my interest. And in the movie that we got, I think it just stuck with me since I saw it. And yeah, I've seen it many, many times since, multiple versions, and it just sticks with me. I love this movie.
Did you see it in theater? I'm sorry. Question first. So are you from Sweden?
Oh, no. See, I am from Mississippi, but I moved to the Netherlands in 2005. Live there now. I'm currently physically in Wisconsin visiting family, but I live in Amsterdam normally. And so, yeah, I was overseas when the film came out. So I think I might have even seen it maybe a little sooner because it might have released sooner for us.
Yeah,
right.
Or it could have been later. I'm not too sure anymore just because I know that movies don't get the English subtitles until way later.
Well, and apparently this one, the DVD release, had like a simplified version of subtitles and people complained about it until they redid them.
Ugh.
But, and sorry, this is going to get personal for you, but so may I ask what brought you to the Netherlands?
What brought me to the Netherlands was a previous relationship. I had an online relationship that I met through vampire roleplay, of all things, on the internet.
Okay.
So Vampire the Masquerade is what we were doing. And I was way underage to be doing that in those chat rooms, but, it was late 2000s, early 2000s even. So, you were doing things at the age of 15. Just getting to know people. And then when I hit 18, decided to visit over here and we hit it off. So I stayed. And yeah, that's kind of history. I mean, life has changed since then, but I stayed no matter what kind of punches were thrown at me.
Oh my God. I'm tangenting again, but did y'all ever... I know that Chandler just admitted to this, but like, Joe, did you ever do like when you were a teen, like gay chats when you were a teen?
No, absolutely not. I had a family computer in the living room, and I could not risk it, so I barely even delved into gay corners of the internet until I went to university.
Oh my God. I frequented for about a year this one. I think it was called 123gayteenchat.com. And
what a name.
I probably talked to a very high number of pedophiles because one day that website was gone.
Yeah.
FBI crackdown.
Oh, yeah. AOL was also really rife for that at the time, too.
Ooh, yeah. But it was like, I'm talking to other gays who might know. I don't know.
I mean, here's the thing. You were. It's just that you were probably talking to Hacken equivalents, right?
Yes, exactly. But yeah, no, anyway, so I'm going back. I just wanted to see if, I don't know, if there was you have like a Swedish love or connection that brought you further into this movie.
Not at all. I think, I don't even know if I've been to Sweden. I've been to like Norway. I don't even have Swedish friends. I have, like Finnish friends, Danish friends. I don't think I've met anybody from Sweden actually in the area. But it's just, foreign films in Europe are going to get distributed a lot more freely within Europe than you're going to get out, overseas. So when this one was being released and me being a horror fan, having other horror friends who were like, I've read the book, you should watch the film. I couldn't not,
Yeah.
Well, I think there's something so universal about this film. Like, it's a movie about a pair of outcasts who come together, and we're going to have conversations about whether this film is romantic or tragic or both. But at the end of the day, I remember the first time I saw it, I definitely connected to Oscar with all of the bullying stuff, all of the having interests that fall outside of the norm. I don't have a murder handbook or anything where I was collecting newspaper clippings, but I think one of the things that I so strongly connect to in this film is just Oscar is a weird fucking little kid. And I was a weird fucking little kid. And it's hard to be like that out in the world.
And swap out murder book for just an interest in the horror genre.
Sure.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's something too. I mean, like, it's interesting. You don't see this film show up on a lot of lists of queer horror, which is interesting to me because it is queer horror.
Well, I think that there are more obvious choices. I think when people start to talk about this movie, if people hadn't thought of it as queer horror, they immediately go, oh, okay, yeah, but it's sly, right? There's blink and you miss it kind of trans obviousness in this movie. But I think a lot of people choose to just deliberately overlook it and say, oh, it's a child vampire movie.
I mean, let's also not forget the fact that just transphobia within queer discourse is still quite strong. So it's not surprising to me to have a film with such a trans character in it getting a little omitted from that designation. But yeah, I mean, the movie, it's just the lived experience as well. Like you said, these outcasts, I think that's where it is.
Yeah.
The sexuality may not be as explored on the surface, but... You know, you asked a question recently about what constitutes a queer horror film, and I think this is a movie that really taps into that debate a bit.
Fun fact, everything is queer horror.
It's so true. It's so true. Also, the people who responded and clearly were listing films that we have covered and then asking, is this queer horror? I'm just like, oh, do you follow us and not even listen to the podcast? Okay, I'm moving on.
I do think we have a sizable amount of followers on social media that are just like, oh, horror queers. They're gays that like horror. So they may, I mean, I think we have some Facebook group members that don't know we're a podcast.
It's wild out there on the internet, folks.
But yeah, okay, well, why don't we start talking about how this film came to be? Because, yeah, I mean, it was birthed from a book. And, Joe, I know you've read it. Chandler, have you read this novel?
I have not.
Okay, cool. I haven't either. So I started it. I got about 30 pages in, and I think I just never picked it back up. Not because I didn't like it. It just fell away.
I won't lie. This is a bit of a hard read, and we can go into some of the things that the author, because this is an adaptation by the author himself. So what Lindqvist does in the adaptation is he wisely removes a lot of the extra shit that weighs the book down.
Okay.
Which is what you should do when you're adapting a book into a film.
Yes.
Well, yeah, so this project started in late 2004 when John Nordling, a producer at the production company EFTI, contacted John Ajvid Lindqvist, his publisher, Ordfront, to acquire the rights for a film adaptation of his novel, Let the Right One In, which had come out earlier that year. Now, apparently, Nordling was the 48th person to call to get the rights to this book.
I gathered it was very popular.
Yes, to the point though where when he called, they basically laughed at him and goes, "Okay, we'll put you on the list."
Wow. Imagine being in that position. Oh, our book is so desirable. We can just laugh at people who want to adapt it.
Oh, you want a reservation? I'm so sorry. I'll put you on the list though.
We're actually all full right now, but let us put you on the list.
But, okay, I don't know how this happened, but somehow he was able to just get through directly to Lindqvist. And they got discussing, and they realized they had the same idea about what kind of film they should make. And so, I guess, fuck the other 47 people ahead of him on that waiting list, because he got it.
Nice.
So a friend introduced Tomas Alfredson to the novel, and Alfredson doesn't, again, this is the weird thing to me, he doesn't like to receive books normally because, and I quote, "it is a private thing to choose what to read."
I mean, fair.
Yeah.
Again, as someone who runs an adaptation podcast, I can tell you the book for me, I'm a bit of a slow read, so that's a factor. But there's something so enticing about film and television because it's a finite amount of time. Like when I put Let the Right One In, it's 2 hours and then I'm done it regardless. Whereas when I sit down to read the book version of it, it took me 2 weeks because I had to go at my own pace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, I guess whenever someone recommends to me a book, I'm always like, okay, yeah, Whereas with a movie, I'm like, cool, I'm adding it to my list.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's really easy to add a film to your list. With books, I always feel so bad, too, because if you don't like it, you're like, oh, but you put so much effort into it. I know I did, so...
It's the commitment, right?
Yeah.
It is. But anyway, so after a few weeks, he decided to just go ahead and read it. And while he didn't really have much experience or affinity towards the horror genre, but it was the depiction of the bullying that affected him the most based on his own experiences of bullying as a child. And so he connected with Linkfist, and they discovered they understood each other very well, and that was that. So in addition to EFTI, the production company, co-producers included Sveriges Television and the regional production center Film Pool Nord. The production involved a total budget of around 29 million Swedish kroner, aka 4.5 million US dollars, roughly. They got support from the Swedish Film Institute, Danish entertainment company Nordisk Film and TV Fond, production company WAG, and the French premium TV channel Canal Plus.
Uh-huh.
I feel like whenever Canal Plus shows up, you're just like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
We're going to see some good shit
That's how
now.
it is, yep.
Do y'all... It's like just Canal Films, right? Like that's what they'll put before the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I always associate it with Love Actually. I don't know why. Like, you know how you have like certain movies where certain logos, you're like, that's the one. It's Love Actually. That's it. I'll touch on the screenplay a bit because I think honestly the most interesting thing is going to be some of the differences that you already addressed, Joe, and I feel like we can discuss those in the plot, but...
Sure.
Linkfist had insisted on writing the screenplay himself, which he would go on to do. Alfredson had no familiarity with the vampire and horror genres, as I said. He initially expressed skepticism at having the original author do the adaptation, but found the end result very satisfying, so
it all worked out.
Yeah. Casting for the lead actors took almost a year, with open castings held all over Sweden. Kari Hildebrandt, selected to audition for the role as Oscar after an initial screening at his school, eventually landed the role, with Lena Leandersson responding to an online advertisement seeking a 12-year-old boy or girl, quote-unquote, good at running.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know about this sort of gender-neutral casting call for Ely.
Well, and that's... I mean, look. I didn't know until this week that they had dubbed over this actress with a male actor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which, because they did it after the fact. So A, if I was her, I'd be a little pissed off. But B, it does add to that kind of, I guess, androgyny, yes, of the character.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's an absolute deliberate decision, and it produces an intriguingly uncanny feeling. Like, you know something isn't quite right when you first watch it, and then when you find out, it just clicks into place. Like, yes, okay, now I understand why.
Yeah.
That being said, though, when we're talking about Ellie or Ely, do we want to use they-them pronouns just to keep things neutral?
I'm going to suggest that we do, and it'll become a lot more evident if we're making comparisons to the book. But, yeah, I think just because we don't actually know how Ellie refers to themselves, we shouldn't put a gender onto them.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, Alfredson said that this casting process was the most difficult part of making the film, and Lee Anderson had to go through 3 more auditions before she was selected to play Ellie. Although the film takes place in Blackeberg, a suburb of Stockholm, Sweden, principal photography took place in Luleå in the north of Sweden to ensure enough snow and cold weather. Because, y'all, this movie is cold.
Yes. Oh, man.
Yes, it is.
The jungle gym where much of the interaction between Oscar and Ellie takes place was constructed specifically for the film, and this is actually stuff that I actually do think is really interesting. Its design was intended to suit the CinemaScope format better than the regular jungle gym, which would typically have to be cropped height-wise. So we're going into, which types of cameras they had to use and which lenses they had to use to make sure we got the right mise-en-scène that Alfredson was going for.
I just think that's so important, though. Like, if you think about it, all of their initial interactions are taking place on this one set. Well, it's probably a real location, but it's vitally important that you see the distinction between the two characters, but also the height, right? Like, Ellie is always up top, and there's a reticence to join Oscar on the bottom.
Yep. There's a lot of height in the film too. So now that you mention, I never even would have considered how much work they would have had to put into that.
Yeah, well, and when you watch it again too, like there's so many wide shots in this movie.
Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah. It's all about the open landscapes, and you're right. I mean, the cold is such an important factor in this film. I think, Trace, I mentioned to you offline that this movie just makes me feel cold. Like, it is chilliness embodied, and it's one of the reasons why I think it's so evocative compared to some other films. And I would say, Chandler, it's interesting that you brought up 30 Days of Night, because that is another winter set vampire film. So rare.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we're always clamoring for more like, snow horror. And it's like, oh, well, we have a bunch of vampire movies that do it. Where are my snow slashers, though?
Yeah.
So most of the filming used a single fixed Arri 535B camera, which means nothing to me, but with almost no handheld usage and few cuts. Tracking shots relied on a track-mounted dolly rather than Steadicam to create a calm, predictable camera movement that would just aid the feel of the film.
Mm-hmm.
The crew paid special attention to lighting, with cinematographer Hoyt van Hoytema and director Alfredson inventing a technique they called spray light.
Oh.
They describe this as if you could capture dull electrical light in a can and spray it like hairspray across Ellie's apartment, it would have the same result as what they created for this. And for any emotional scenes between Oscar and Ellie, they consistently diffused the lighting.
That's interesting to me, because I think that's another reason why the film spoke to me so much, is just the fact that these apartments feel so real because of the lighting. And just, if you've ever had those kind of intimate relationships as a child, hanging out with somebody's house, especially if you're like from the poor end or they're from the poor end, and you're kind of dealing with the differences in your electricity and stuff, there's just a vibe that you get of just kind of like quietly sitting in that room talking to each other. And I could feel that again in this movie. And that's so interesting to hear that they had to make a whole technique to do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, when going into CGI, because this film has a little bit of it, they had about 50 shots with CGI imagery, that's redundant, with computer-generated imagery. Alfredson wanted to make them very subtle and almost unnoticeable. The scene that probably looks the worst, and I think we all probably agree on this, is the sequence with the cats attacking Virginia.
Yeah.
It was one of the most complicated scenes to film. It required several weeks of drafting and planning, and they use a combination of real cats, stuffed cats, and CGI cats. I'm not gonna lie, and I love this film a lot.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's the worst part of the movie.
Well, it would have been better. I mean, you know what? Just do all these stuffed cats and just throw a bunch of stuffed cats on her, and have them just fly off.
Totally would have worked.
Either that or abbreviate it down, because there's a lot of visible cats in this particular sequence, right? Like, you could have just hinted at it and we would have gotten the gist, but instead, we had to go outside of the apartment, down the stairs, and you're just like, no, we don't need to actually see this much.
Because we have that one shot where it like leaves the room and we're outside the window looking in. A la that Candyman kill with the art critic. I almost think it would have been better if they just done something like that, where we keep pulling back as the cats swarm her.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Look at the 70s as well. I mean, just get a close-up of a cat that's really pissed off and you're good. You didn't need to have a CGI cat screaming at the screen.
Right.
There are some shots that every cat outside of that scene is real, right? And there's a shot of a cat just standing up walking towards her, and it is clearly a CGI cat. And I'm just like, y'all, film a cat walking.
Yeah.
I mean, cats are notoriously difficult to work with. So.
That is true.
It was probably sitting in the corner.
The cat's like, actually, I'm on lunch. I don't really feel like attacking right now. So can somebody get me a cig?
The sound design was designed so that the soundscape would come as close to the actors as possible, with audible heartbeats, breathing, and swallowing always prevalent throughout the film. Late in production, so I mean, I already kind of said this, but I'll just reiterate. It was decided to overdub Lee Anderson's voice with a less feminine one. So they auditioned both men and women up to the age of 40 for the voice role. And after a vote, the film team ended up selecting Elif Salin, who provides all of Ellie's spoken dialogue. Footage of Salin eating melon or sausage was combined with various animal noises to emulate the sound of Ellie biting into her victims and drinking their blood.
Wow.
That being said, the sound crew won a Guldbagge Award. Oh my god. The sound crew won a Guldbagge Award for Best Achievement from the Swedish Film Institute for the nightmarishly great sound, that's a quote, in the film.
Okay. Good on them.
Yeah.
Yep. So, let's go through this release, Chandler, because we're going to figure out when the fuck you saw this. Let the Right One In premiered at the Gothenburg Film Festival in Sweden in January of 2008. Alfredson won the festival's Nordic Film Prize, and it subsequently played at other festivals. It did Tribeca in New York City in April of 2008, and it won the Founders Award for Best Narrative Feature. It did the Edinburgh Film Festival in June that year, where it won the Rotten Tomatoes Critical Consensus Award, the first of its kind. The Swedish premiere was originally planned for April 18, 2008, but following the positive response from the festival screenings, the producers decided to postpone the release until autumn to allow for a longer theatrical run. They were going to release the film for a special series of screenings in Luleå beginning September 24th and lasting 7 days. This was canceled when the Swedish Film Institute announced that Everlasting Moments had been selected over Let the Right One In as Sweden's submission for the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film.
Right.
Put that in your back pocket.
I was going to say, but that isn't what happens.
The distributors released it in October 24th, 2008 in Sweden, in Norway, and as a limited release in the United States. In Australia, the film was released in March of 2009, and in Britain in April of 2009. We got widespread critical acclaim for this. We got a 98% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 8.3 out of 10, 82 out of 100 on Metacritic, and a Letterboxd score of 8 out of 10.
Right. We should probably know that Entertainment Weekly is not part of that 98%, right, Trace?
Well, so interestingly enough, that is actually how I heard about this movie, because in 2008, Entertainment Weekly was still my Bible. I got that issue every week for 10 years of my life, and I loved it. But yeah, Owen Gleiberman giving this movie a C. He was the only critic at the time who was panning this movie. And he actually, to the point where a year later, he went back and rewrote another review because he got so much hate mail for his C review for this movie.
Wow.
Yeah, and folks, if you have not read the re-review that he did, it is atrocious. He is atrocious. He is one of our worst working film critics. So happy that he's still in the game.
How do you feel? How do you really feel, Joe?
Fuck that dude. He makes film critics look like idiots because his criticism it's mind-bogglingly bad.
Yeah, I would agree. Liza Schwarzbaum was always my choice of Entertainment Weekly critic.
Oh my god, 100%. It was always dear Lord, please let Liza be the one who reviews this movie.
Well, also, his initial review was a capsule review. It was 200 words.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, by the way, though, Chandler, he didn't like it again on his second watch. He still found it very confusing.
Oh, what a surprise.
But no, we have lots of praise, though. People praise Alfredson's ability to tell stories through pictures instead of words. A kitchen sink fantasy that gives the vampire story back something it's been missing for a long time, aka the ability to frighten us. They praise his beautiful cinematography, the restrained approach to the material, and of course the child actors were praised for their performances.
Yeah, this has got to be some of the best child acting in horror I think I've ever seen.
Same. Oh, yes.
In terms of legacy, this film, so outside of just your regular reviews, I know we went through some awards at the film festivals, but Bloody Disgusting did rank this film first in our list of the top 20 horror films of the decade. Although it is Chris Eggertson writing this, former guest Chris Eggertson writing this piece, and he does say, it's rare enough for a horror film to be good. Even rarer are those that function as genuine works of art. Let the Right One In is one of those films.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yes, I just think it's weird that he's it's rare for horror films to be good. But that was our mindset in 2008.
Fair enough. Yeah.
We're going through a rough patch in 2008, if we're being honest, right?
Yes.
But I think that's one of the reasons why this film sort of breaks through, because, Trace, you and I have talked about this so many times, and Chandler, I know you're aware of the sort of ebbs and flows of different subgenres, but 2008, right? What are we getting stateside? At this time, it would have been the tail end of all the remakes, and we're starting to move into, we're sort of mid-torture porn moving into J-horror. And along comes a really quiet, very subdued, icy, melodramatic, romantic vampire film. And it just feels like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
It also gets ranked number 15 in Empire's 2010 list of the best films of world cinema. Not horror, just all cinema.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair.
It placed number 28 on Time Out's Top 100 Horror Films list, and it was later voted the 94th greatest film since the year 2000 in an international critics poll conducted by the BBC. Going back quickly to this Academy Award snafu. So, okay. The details surrounding the eligibility of the film are... there's some confusion, but being released on October 24th of 2008, the film would normally be eligible for submission for the 82nd Academy Awards. However, the producers decided to release it, as I said, in September as a 7-day limited run only in Lulea. That would be exactly enough time to meet the criteria for the 81st Academy Awards.
Right.
When the Swedish Film Institute, the week before, it's September 16th, announced that Everlasting Moments had been selected instead of the Let the Right One In, the Lulea screenings were then canceled. Well, the problem is then, it could have been eligible for the 82nd Academy Awards because it got released actually in October.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was it wasn't among the films considered because the Swedish Film Institute doesn't allow a film to be considered twice since it had already been considered for the 81st Academy Awards.
So it got loopholed.
Exactly. Yeah. So we could have had an Academy Award-winning horror film here, but alas, that was not in the cards for Let the Right One In.
Which is so interesting, though, because it does say it was nominated for Best Foreign Film Not in an English Language. Oh, that's the British Academy Film Awards. There we go.
BAFTAs.
Yes.
So the BAFTAs to the rescue.
And then, we got an American remake directed by Matt Reeves just 2 years later in 2010. Mm-hmm. And we also got a stage play production of this film, which, Chandler, you said you've seen before we got onto this recording.
Yes, it was amazing. I saw it in London, and I don't know how they pulled it off, but they did.
They did.
Yeah, they did.
It's a lot of trees, a lot of fake snow, and a big tank.
Yes.
And a jungle gym.
I mean, you folks are underselling this so hard. I looked at the trailer, and yeah, it does look like a rather small affair, but also me trying to wrap my head around how they do the finale nearly gave me an aneurysm.
No, it is gorgeous, and it sucks because you can't find pictures of the tank, like the pool set online, because that's, if you know the film, like that's why you're going to see this play.
It's the money shot of the play.
But it is really cool, and it is a gorgeous play. And I'm emphasizing play; it's not a musical because I did walk into this thinking it was going to be a musical.
Oh, really? Okay, no, yeah,
weird.
I knew it was going to be a play going into it. Did you also know? Did you read anything or see any kind of promotional stuff about how they prepared for it?
No,
okay.
It was touring through Austin, and I got last minute tickets because I was like, oh fuck, I didn't even know it was a thing.
Insane. So whoever's playing Oscar had to learn how to do diving techniques the way you would in the military, so that they could hold their breath for 5 minutes.
Holy shit!
Yeah. Well, but because you do see the boy being pushed underwater with an arm, but again, the actor holding his head underwater is above the eye line of the stage, so you can't. Yeah. It's just like the film; you can't see what's above him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so but we're not going to talk about those things. And granted, though, I think we all agree that the remake is a very solid film. So
it is.
Yeah.
Let's go into this one.
Okay, so we open on a snowy evening, and we follow Oscar, who is played by Kari Hedebrandt, and he is watching a man who will eventually come to know as Hacken, played by Per Ragnar, and what appears to be a young girl, Ellie, played by Lena Leanderson, arrive at his apartment complex by cab. And then, of course, I mean, a lot of this film is from Oscar's perspective, but we're also getting a lot of shots that fill in context for the audience that Oscar doesn't know. And that makes it interesting. So we do get to watch this man, Hacken, immediately board up the windows. So for us, it's like, okay, he's either secretive or he's trying to hide something, or, oh shit, we got a vampire.
Oh shit. The first line of this film, by the way, because we have the credits going through a black screen with white text, but the first line spoken is Oscar saying "squeal like a pig."
Yep.
And
yeah,
did you tell? I mean, I don't know if it was an intentional Deliverance reference, but that is immediately what comes to my mind when I hear someone say "squeal like a pig."
Didn't even think of it.
It is definitely in the book, but I have to feel like the cultural relevance of Deliverance is that is a long shadow. There's a long tail attached to that movie. And that is the most iconic line. And considering we're talking about bullying, I wouldn't be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So at school, we do learn that Oscar is both book smart and the target of extreme bullying, particularly by Connie, who is the ringleader. He is played by Patrick Rydmark. And these kids are shit. They are just garbage children.
The worst. I'm actually glad we don't have more time with them. But also, there's so many parallels to Carrie in this movie, I feel like, too.
Oh, yeah. I will say one of the big differences, and the remake is very faithful in a lot of ways. I think it actually, Matt Reeves has talked about how they are adapting the book, but really it feels more like they're adapting the Swedish film because they're so similar.
Yeah.
One of the key differences between the two texts is that the bullying is way worse in the American version.
Yeah.
And I think it's a testament to, American audiences will not believe this level of bullying in the Swedish version. Like, it's too tame. So they amp it up. And folks, if you haven't watched in a while, the ringleader of the American version is baby Dylan Minnette.
I knew that, but I didn't even think about this. I didn't know that they went into it saying, we're doing the book instead, because that makes not one, but two horror remakes / readaptations with Chloe Grace Moritz, where they're like, we're going to do the book, but they don't. And the other one's Carrie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason that I say that is just because the book has so much content and the American film is leaner in terms of excising a lot of that extra baggage. Like all of the stuff with the adults who are drinking in the bar, like Lackey and Virginia and Gosta, a lot of that gets eliminated. There's so much shit associated with them in the book, and there's actually an entire other storyline involving characters who don't appear in either film that just like eats up the page count.
Which, okay, so for both of you, because I was thinking about this last night too when I was watching this, and I was like, I feel like, I'm sorry, not that you need the Lackey and the Virginia characters, but I feel like you could excise that and devote more time to Ellie and Oscar, or Hakan and her relationship, or Ellie's backstory, or anything like that, instead of having these characters. But I guess the only thing you'd be missing is Lackey finding Ellie in the bathtub. Yeah,
but you also have you get a little vampire lore there.
Yes.
I guess is why they're doing it, because you're actually seeing how this is transmitted just through a bite, kind of like a werewolf. I haven't read the book, but I had some friends who've told me about it as well. And correct me if I'm wrong here, or tell me how it goes, Joe. But is it that all the stuff they kind of like take out of it as well really leans more into that, right? Like people's relationships in the area, but also a bit more of like what it means to be a vampire? Because I hear there's more vampires in the book than just Ellie.
So, yeah, the big thing, and we'll talk about it a little bit more when we get to what happens to Hakan, the sort of quote-unquote father figure, and his demise at the hospital. In the book, he doesn't die. He goes on to become a Frankenstein's monster.
Right.
But you're absolutely right, Chandler. A lot of the book is actually more concerned about treating this as a community. So it's important that we get a multiplicity of perspectives about what is happening within this specific geographical area. Whereas the film very wisely says this is Oscar and Ellie's story.
Right.
So do you like the book, Joe?
I liked parts of it. I won't lie, it is a really fucking hard read, if only because there are so many characters, and they're actually all important, but the way it's written, it could be a translation issue, but it's difficult to keep track of who everybody is and where they're at different moments. And then there's also a really just absolutely ginormous amount of pedophilia, because we're actually in Hakan's head, and in the book, he is a full-on child predator. Like, that's how Ellie finds him, is he has been fired from his job for having suggestive imagery of naked children. And then Ellie uses that to bring him on board and kill for them. But it's because Hakan wants to have a sexual relationship with Ellie.
Okay, wait. I'm sorry, I know we're talking about the end here, but for both, cause doesn't that change the entire read? Because I've always read it as, Hakan was a child when he met Ellie, and Oscar becomes the new Hakan.
Yes.
And that backstory completely removes that.
Completely removes it.
Yeah, completely, yeah.
Yeah. And also we get Ellie's entire backstory. So how Ellie came to be a vampire and all the stuff with the gender.
Oh, well, we can talk about that when we get that reveal.
Exactly, yeah. So back to this film, really at this point, we're getting tasters of who these characters are, but we have no idea if they have a relationship to one another or what their deal is. So it's pretty telling that very early in the film, we follow Hakan as he prepares these chemicals. He's got this oxygen tank, or so we imagine. And then we follow him as he goes into the woods, gasses a man, strings him up, slits the throat, and starts collecting the blood. It's
great.
kind of confronting.
Yeah. But also it is bloody, but like the way that Alfredson shoots this, it doesn't feel gory or disgusting. But again, it's that sound design coming in too with the gurgling.
Yeah. It's also a very Swedish kind of crime drama way of filming this.
Yes.
You know, the girl with the dragon tattoo also has a lot of stuff in it that's not really shown, but you remember all of those gory little details because of just how everybody plays it and how it's filmed. And yeah, all their movies, all of them do this, and they're so wonderful and they're delicious.
Also, talk about a book that was really difficult to keep track of some characters. The girl with the dragon tattoo.
Yes.
Actually, that's a great point of comparison. So if folks have read those books, that's actually what Let the Right One In feels more like. It's actually more of a Swedish thriller in that regard.
Okay.
But it doesn't give you a family tree like Stieg Larsson did. to flip back to every page.
Oh my God. So vital. So vital. So Hacken is actually doing reasonably well. You can tell that he has done this before. This is not his first rodeo slitting a random man's throat in the woods. And he's doing okay until a dog comes and just sits right in front of him and watches him. And sadly, where there is a dog, there are people walking through this woods. And he gets really flustered, fucks everything up, and runs away, leaving the body there without the container of blood.
Which, that sucks.
Yeah.
It super sucks. So we cut back to the apartment courtyard, and Oscar is, yes, mimicking Connie's words, stabbing this tree, talking about squealing like a pig. And this is when Ellie is introduced. So we see Ellie. They are watching him, and almost immediately it's like, we're intrigued. You can tell that Oscar doesn't quite know what to make of this person, but he's so shy and introverted. You know, every scene in these early couple of moments, Oscar won't even look at Ellie. You know, he's always downcast or looking in the opposite direction, but he is interested by them.
Well, and this is what you were talking about, Chandler, earlier, with how they are always on a higher level than Oscar. And that is how we meet Ellie. They are on the top of this jungle gym, just waiting to just jump down. But also the first thing they say is, we can't be friends.
Yes.
Like, okay, well, maybe don't walk outside and talk to him.
Yeah.
Well, but you get every impression that Ellie has just come from some kind of, you know, where we leave this movie is where Ellie is beginning this film. Yeah. So hypothetically, they have been locked up in some kind of trunk over a long period of time. I get the impression they're stretching their legs. And one thing that immediately visually cues you as wrong is that Ellie is not wearing a jacket or a hat or gloves or shoes. And you're just like, oh, something's not right with this child.
Do y'all remember if y'all knew it was a vampire? I mean, I guess you had to have known it was a vampire movie when you walked in, right?
I didn't. I didn't know
really?
for sure.
Okay.
I didn't watch any trailers. Just had a friend tell me that it was a good horror movie and to watch it. And
oh, those recommendations. I saw something really good. You should just check it out. No context.
I mean, I didn't mention any box office stuff because unfortunately this movie never opened in more than 53 theaters in the United States. So it's like, it made $2 million in the States, but it was, I mean, you know, it made more of its money overseas.
Right. Yeah.
Because it actually got a release.
Oh, fair. No, I didn't know that it was, you do and you don't, I guess. The title for me already kind of gave it away, what we were going to be dealing with there. Also, as we're talking about Ellie in the scene, when they want to get closer to Oscar, they jump off of the jungle gym, and it's the way they land.
Oh, yeah.
It's just so graceful. There's almost no plump to it at all. And I think that's kind of your first real hint, if you haven't noticed all the feet and everything.
Yeah.
So,
the feet of it all.
The feet of it all. Yeah. Yeah.
It almost feels like Wire Fu watching Ellie in some of these moves because they are so graceful. And again, it's that kind of uncanniness where you're seeing what is very clearly a real life child actress, but moving with the experience of a dancer and speaking with the cadence of an adult.
Hey, it's not just me, right? There are times when they are drinking blood where their face changes, right?
Yes, so there's another actress that actually plays that role. It's aged Ellie, and it's played by Suzanne Rubin.
Got it. Okay, because I definitely picked it up when they are eating, I want to say it's Lackey, and they look up and they're screaming, and I was like, that that looks very weird. And then the next shot, it's back to Lee Anderson.
Yes, it's so seamless. I think it happens 2 or 3 times in the entire film, but it's always wait, did I just, and then Lee Anderson's back on screen. So you actually question what you've seen.
I love that.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the American remake, they don't do that at all.
No.
They're just like, no, it's Chloe Grace Moretz the whole time.
Which I think is fine, honestly. I mean, the thing that remake gets wrong is it's when they kill the man under the bridge, where I remember that CGI in the remake being egregiously bad.
Yeah, and when Ellie climbs up the hospital wall, basically anytime they do vampire motion in the remake is janky.
Yeah.
Which is sad because the rest of that film is so damn good.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, way to take me right out of it. Shit.
I mean, also the shot of like Ellie climbing up the hospital wall in this movie, I was like, that is beautiful and gorgeous and awesome. Just do that.
And nightmare. She's like a spider. Oh,
yes.
You don't know that they're there.
I had to rewind it because I saw them, when they start moving and they go up the window, but I was like, oh, wait, they're there the whole time.
Yeah. Well, it's because it's composed like a fucking beautiful painting, but Ellie is in shadow, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the use of framing and the screen...
real estate.
The use of framing and just like where characters are positioned and how we're establishing these shots, it's like everything looks like art.
Yeah, agreed. Which... because this director would go on to do Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which I've never seen, but
it's pretty but boring.
Struggle saying that name all the time. And The Snowman.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I gave you all the clues, Mr. Detective.
Lord. But hopefully he comes back with a hit sometime.
There we go. So at this point, Hacken comes home, and it's a big kerfuffle because... Ellie's waiting for that blood and he ain't got none. So it's not a good thing. But it does immediately give you some insight into their power dynamics. Of course, this is from Oscar's perspective through the wall. But normally we don't expect to hear children yelling at their parents. So again, something's different here.
We also don't really... we don't really know for sure yet that this is Ellie talking to Hakan because we don't see Ellie in the frame.
No, this is from Oscar's point of view in his apartment, hearing what's going on in their apartment, but we never see it.
I do think we see an exterior shot, at least to see kind of like the shadows from the neighboring window.
Mm-hmm.
Also, what I really like about it is that this is one of the first moments where getting that older and more masculine voice is used very strongly, because it just sounds like some 20-year-old dude is screaming at somebody in the apartment. Oscar's like, ooh, what's going on over there?
It's as they get hungrier, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the sounds of the stomach, too, are not pleasant.
Oh, yeah. And Lee Anderson sells that shit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we do see Oscar's mother, but she's barely a character in this. Like, she's kind of a presence in the apartment, but I'm going to try not to be ungenerous to this mother character because clearly she is going through some shit, but also it's just like... lady, your child is going through a whole lot and you are not there for Oscar.
Oh, yeah.
Because she's a working mom and the dad is an alcoholic. That's all we really get to know about either of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like, do we want more screen time devoted to that?
No.
But at the same time, yeah, I get it. Like, lady. But it's also, I guess have we said that this is a period piece?
We have not.
No.
It takes place in 1982.
Yes.
Right. So it might also be that maybe parents were more lax back then with their children.
Well, it's interesting because in the book, it's actually tied into the Cold War. There's actually a moment where a Russian submarine surfaces and everybody panics. And like the place that Oscar takes Ellie, which kind of looks like a party room where he tries to do the blood pack and it goes very badly. That's a bomb shelter. But you don't really know it. Like, you have to read around the edges of the film to understand some of that context.
Got it.
A little historical knowledge goes a long way in that.
Yeah, because even, like, the area that they're living in is meant to be... It's, like, created for poor people. So it's, like, it was planned in a certain way. It's why, like, all the apartments look identical. It's because it's meant to be a poor part of town where basically the Swedish government was like, poor people, go live here, please. We would like you off in this area.
Quite common in Europe, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
It's just interesting, right? Because there's extra class mixed into the critique and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Trace, I talked over you.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, you love your class critiques, don't you?
I do. Indeed, I do. You know why? Because we don't do it well enough in North America.
No, I always respect you for that, though, because that's never something, because I'm so privileged. I don't know. I never notice the critiques all the time, so you always bring that to my eye.
Yeah, it's often there. That's the problem, but...
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Oscar's mom is kind of fretting about him. He's stealing clips from the newspaper so that he can put it into this, murder handbook. And
his masturbation book.
That's all valuable insight to get us to where Oscar's headspace is, right? Because we've seen this child attacking a tree with a pocket knife. Now we see that he's collecting headlines about murders, and it's just very much, okay, he's a little bit odd. Now, it doesn't justify the kind of bullying that he's experiencing at the hands of Coney and these other kids, but it's not hard to understand why he's a bit of an outsider.
No. Right. This is where I started to really relate here, if I may tangent just a little bit.
Yes, go for it.
Because, I, as a kid, really expressed it. I've always been a bit of that gothy, edgy, alternative kind of kid.
Mm-hmm.
From, say, the age of 13 or so. The moment I saw what a Marilyn Manson was, I was kind of like, whoa, people can look like that. Right. And then you start seeing, like, other metal bands and stuff like, well, hold up. Black is a good color. And, you adopt it that way. And so I know why I was a bit of a lightning rod for it, just because of... It's like, look at me. If you didn't want to like somebody, I was really easy to go like, you're it today.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, if you have a bit of a headstrong attitude against it, then they're going to like, and you're it every day.
Yeah.
Until we stop, we break you, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I related a lot to Oscar in this situation, especially at that age, because I had moved to Illinois, which was very cold, very icy, away from my family. And I was just me and my mom. Now, my mom also had to get a job and wasn't home very often. Come to find out, I found this out years later, but she had a lot of medical problems. So she was in and out of the doctors while I was hanging out at school and just getting my shit kicked in, basically. Right. And the school system has never been that wonderful in the United States. So, a lot of what Oscar went through, I went through. And it's just so interesting to me to see how they just pick on him for almost seemingly no reason. Because at the very least, I kind of drew it in to me. Like, okay, I get it. With him, he's just kind of like keeping to himself. Oh, he read a book today. Oh, poor kid. Yeah, it's going to beat the crap out of him. I guess it just really touched that nerve in me of just like, okay, so people really just smell it. Mm-hmm. They know when you're going to be vulnerable to it, and they know it before you've even had an interaction. That's the incredible part to me for the characterization in this film.
It's so interesting when it comes to... At least the bullying in this film, at least, because it's or even going to Carrie, if you want to link that again.
Right.
It's not even like, I feel bad even saying this, but I watch them and I'm like, these people aren't doing anything that merits being bullied. And not that anything merits being bullied, but it's like they're just quiet introverts. Like that's all they are. And these bullies just feed on that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why... It's such a blink and you'll miss it kind of moment in the film. It is elaborated on in a little bit more detail in the book, but it's important that we later see that Connie is himself a victim of bullying by his older brother, Jimmy, who ultimately is the one who escalates the bullying into a homicidal level, and that's why we get the pool scene at the end. And I don't want to... It sounds like I'm saying, oh, well, if you're being bullied, then you have a reason to bully other people and then it's acceptable. It's the same thing as like if you get, molested as a child, it doesn't mean that you're going to become queer. It doesn't mean that you're going to become a molester. Like it's not a cause and effect thing like that. But I do think it helps us to understand a little bit more where, people get preyed upon because people need to feel powerful and they seek out what is perceived weakness. And in this case, Oscar doesn't appear to have any friends and he's very quiet and he's smart. So it's like, oh, the smart, shy kid with no friends to help him out. That's easy prey. If I'm Connie, I'm looking at this kid saying, yeah, you're ripe for the picking.
Well, and it explains his behavior. It doesn't excuse his behavior.
Yes, thank you. That is vital.
Also on that targeting level, I will also say that the being smart part, I think, you have to have a level of you threaten the person somehow, especially if you're not throwing it out there of just like, hey, I'm not like anybody else, bully me.
Right.
If you just are like, why are people coming at me? It's like, well, how well are you doing? what are you doing that's making them feel very insecure? And they just feel like they have to stomp you out in front of everybody to make an example out of you because they're not going to keep up with you.
That's okay. I'm not tooting my own horn here, but I was a flamboyant child.
Okay.
And I was very loud, but I was also like very confident, or at least I gave across that air of confidence. And it wasn't until I started bullying that I was like, wait, should I not be confident because I'm doing something deserving of this treatment? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think you're right. I think for me specifically, that's what drew bullies to me, outside of the general like effeminate flamboyantness of myself.
This is the part where I once again just reiterate, kids are shit. We are so mean to each other for no apparent reason. And it's just like this social hierarchy where we're trying to figure out where do we fit in. And so often that seems to translate into, okay, so who do I have to beat down to feel better?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's better today? Like generally, not like a widespread, like, oh yeah, bullying doesn't exist anymore. But do you think it's better today with kids?
It's different. I've actually been hanging out with my 13-year-old nephew since I've been here on trip with family, and just some of the stories I hear from him, like I hear how he's been bullied and the things that he's going through, and I can relate to a lot of them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, oh, okay, and I tell him, it's like, oh yeah, I remember when this and this happened, that and that happened, and just he goes pale when he hears about like switchblades and people like pushing you into concrete, and just the level of like, oh yeah, they wanted me actually dead. And in his case, it's just, they're just little shits who are mean to each other and just make you kind of want to not be alive, basically, is what they do now.
I think it's also moved virtually, right? Like, it's important that this film is a period piece. Like, if they remade this movie and modernized it or set it in contemporary times, it wouldn't be Oscar getting bullied at the pool or at school, right? It would be, he would be getting messages online.
Well, but I think that's also why I feel like if I were a screenwriter, I would want to do something like that was a period piece before social media became a thing. Because I feel like that provides so many avenues of, well, why doesn't this happen? Why doesn't this happen? Why doesn't this happen? You just do, 1982, they have phones.
Landlines, yes. Well, it's important that people are not able to get a hold of each other in this movie, right? It advances the plot in several instances.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the local dive bar the next day, we meet some of these locals, and Hacken is there. He is also sort of setting himself apart because everybody else is getting loaded, and he's drinking milk. So Lackey, who is played by Peter Karlberg, definitely notices him. Notices that he not only doesn't fit in, but that he maybe has money. So Lackey tries to saddle up to him and say like, hey, maybe you can buy me a drink, what's your deal, blah, blah, blah. And Hacken just absolutely refuses to engage. He's not rude, but he doesn't want to get involved in any of this. So he just leaves.
He does shotgun that milk pretty fast. You're like, no, I'm good.
I'm done. Thank you, but no.
And as a milk connoisseur, I drink a lot of milk.
Too.
I've never ordered milk. What?
At a restaurant.
At a bar?
Yeah.
But I was like, what if I guess if they make like a White Russian, they have milk.
No, this is milk. This is not an alcoholic beverage.
No, I know, but I was like, what bar would even have milk to serve you?
Well, I can tell you that it's also even stranger in Europe because I am also a milk connoisseur. And, I grew up just wanting to have milk with things. I was like, tacos and milk. It just goes well.
It goes with everything.
Yeah, it does. And so I liked it. I remember the first few times I ordered milk, and it's on the menu. They just kind of look at you like, are you ordering this right now?
Yeah. Are you a 12-year-old child? Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. When I was in Norway, I think milk with pizza is a fantastic combination.
Yes.
And we went to a pizzeria, and a friend of ours who was with us also just drinks milk with just every meal. So he ordered a glass of milk, and I was like, yeah, I could go for some milk. And they just looked at us, and they're like, we have it for like cocktails as an ingredient for the food, but I'm sorry. He's like, well, how much would it cost if I wanted to have it? And they're like, I'm sorry, but you kind of reserve it for babies. But
wow.
Okay, I was okay. This is bad. I was following this gay stand-up comedian. I forgot his name, but he posted his pinned tweet once. This stand-up set he did where he was talking about how he was on a date with a guy who ordered a glass of milk, and then he proceeded to shame this person for ordering this glass of milk because he couldn't stop thinking about the milk churning in his guts before he was going to fuck him.
Oh wow.
And I unfollowed this comedian because I get it's a joke, but I was like, I like milk.
You lost this one, not the milk. That's the line.
Out of curiosity, was it Sean Holenbach?
No.
Okay. Never mind. Okay, so milk aside, Hacken is not making friends. And then we cut back to the yard that night, and Oscar is teaching Ellie how to use his Rubik's Cube. And I love this idea that what brings them together is puzzles, because in a way, Ellie is a puzzle to be solved by both Oscar as well as the film. So Oscar then remarks about Ellie's smell, because Ellie smells a little bit weird. And also, they are not dressed appropriately. And Ellie just kind of dodges this, but they are very sick, and immediately solve this problem by attacking Jacques, who is played by Michael Ram, in the pedestrian underpass. And similar to the first attack scene with Hacken in the woods, this is just a long take, static, long shot. And
it's so beautiful.
It's just such a different way of capturing violence. I feel like I'm not used to it. I want frenetic edits and cuts and things. And this is just, no, you have to live in this. You have to see it coming and then watch it unfold.
Yeah. I also just love, this is one of those moments where the period piece-ness of it all is used, because it was, I'm going to try this. It's like Yoka, I think is how they would say his name. As he's coming up to Ellie, and they're just and their guts are bubbling and everything. They're like, he's like, hey, I'm gonna pick you up and I'm gonna take you to a phone. I love that line. I'll take you to a phone and then we'll see if we can call somebody, as if there's nothing else you can do. And it's such a great way for Ellie to get him close to them.
And again, I really, really appreciate Alfredson's restraint from not cutting to zoom in on this attack. Like, we just look at it from afar as bystanders. And again, I know I say complicit a lot, but it almost makes us feel complicit. We're watching this happen and can't do shit about it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so ironic, right? Because Gosta, who is played by Carl Robert Lindgren, is also watching this. So it's like, we are complicit in it in the same way that he is. You know, he's just watching this attack and stroking his fucking cat. You're like, okay. But then you realize, we're doing the exact same thing. So after drinking the man's blood, Ellie snaps his neck. And then afterwards, Oscar hears more arguing through the wall.
Yeah, that was an interesting one, too, because now we have the power... I mean, I know that the power dynamic never really changes between the two of them. But this is a moment where it sounds like a father scolding a child, because Ellie's told the story like, just let the dead body lying there and snap their neck. And then you have Hakan who's like, I'm trying my best over here and you're just doing all this shit. And I just love that we get the exact same sequence, but then flipped for this moment, because you can only imagine what Oscar's thinking at this moment.
Oh, gosh, yeah, right? Well, one of the things that I find so fascinating about Ellie as a character is that at times they will act as though they have been, alive for 200 years. And then at other times they act like every year of the 12 years that they identify themselves as to Oscar. Like, sometimes they're a child and sometimes they're an ancient vampire. It's just a really fascinating mix, because with Oscar, he always seems like a 12-year-old. His understanding of the world is like, why can't nice things happen to me? Also, I like this person who I think is a girl. And you're just like, oh, Oscar, you're sweet.
I mean, Ellie is 12, give or take.
Yes. And
love
has
that
been
answer.
for many years. Okay, so Gosta ends up telling Lackey, as well as his girlfriend Virginia, who is played by Ika Nord, and the others at the pub about this attack. So they're like, cool, let's go find out what's happened. But all they can find is a little bit of blood underneath the snow. And that's because Hacken has booted ass out to the crime scene, and he is dragging this body to a nearby frozen lake.
I love every shot in the woods. Love. I mean, there is a reason that stage play is primarily trees.
I was thinking that too, because they even do a lot of the stuff with Oscar and his father. Instead of doing any of that in the cabin, they're like, we're using these trees.
Yes.
They play checkers
the heavy
in
mileage
the
out of the
woods.
trees.
Just constant falling snow.
It sounds gorgeous.
It
really
is.
was.
The blocking is stellar.
Oh, I see. So in the morning, Oscar finds the completed Rubik's Cube out at the playset, and Ellie declares that they are, 12 or so. They also come off looking quite a bit cleaner and less disheveled and more just overall healthy. I will say one of the things that I find ironic a little bit about the film and also the book is like Ellie seems to take about a gulp of blood out of all of these victims, and you're just like, can you really not get more out of this person? Like,
they got a tiny body, okay? That's like all they can do. And it does the job, right? They're like, well, I'm better. That's good.
Mm-hmm. For context, in the book, it's made clear that Ellie cannot drink dead blood. So, like, Hacken couldn't kill someone and then take the blood, and then they would feed. Like, Ellie would then feed from that blood for weeks or months at a time. It has to be fresh blood, which is why Hacken is constantly having to go out and find fresh victims.
Yeah, so important for later, too.
Honestly, well, I guess it's for cleanup, but I'm like, honestly, I would just start bringing people back to the apartment and just be like, here, kill him, and I'll get rid of I'll fucking acid the hell out of this body.
Yeah, I'll use the acid for other people's bodies, not my own body.
Well, he also two-faces himself instead of, like, whole-facing himself.
Oh, man. It's not for lack of trying.
Yeah.
So at school, Oscar delays leaving in order to copy out Morse code so that he can better communicate with Ellie, but it doesn't end up helping him with the bullies because they're just waiting for him outside, and he gets whipped by a stick in the face.
Yeah. In like the frigid cold, too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So at home, he ends up lying to his mother, but he does tell Ellie the truth when they meet up, and Ellie encourages him to hit back hard.
Oh, they're like, bitch, you gotta hit them back. Otherwise, they're gonna keep doing it.
Which is, okay, so I know we've had a lot of conversation already about bullying. What do you two think about this messaging where you have to stand up to your bullies, otherwise it will just continue on indefinitely?
Trace, you want to start with?
I'll start. I support it, but here's the thing. But that stems from me regretting never doing it myself.
Okay.
I was so afraid of getting in trouble
Right.
that I never caused a ruckus. I always followed the rules. That included when I was getting bullied. And again, most of my bullying was verbal. It wasn't a lot of physical abuse, so I got lucky in that department.
I mean, you don't need to diminish it because verbal bullying is also awful.
Yeah, I know, but I'm like, I'm not getting the shit kicked out of me when I'm leaving school. But I take your point. But I wish I had the, for lack of a better term, the balls to fight back. And so when I watch stories about bullying, I get a lot of catharsis from that when they do fight back, because it's like it's living out a fantasy that I never got to have.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's me.
Okay. Consider this like a PSA, I guess.
Okay.
So anybody who's listening to this who is probably too young to be listening to this podcast,
but they are out there. We know
but
for
you're
sure.
out there. So I'm going to talk to you a little specifically right now. If you think it's real cool sounding to like beat the crap out of other people, I know what it's like. You want to get that revenge on people as well. My advice is you got to be smart. So the most important thing here is you need to know, can you do it? Should you do it? Are you the aggressor? Are you the one who's in the wrong in the situation? Are you defending yourself? And can you even do that? I've had many a time where I was a spindly little, 90-pound kid wet and, getting all bold in front of people. And those were the days I came home just completely disheveled and bloodied up and not having a good day.
Yeah.
And then, as I grew around like 13, 14, I suddenly shot up to like 6'2". And then people still trying to bully me.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah, it got worse because, he's a nerd and we can go for the knees.
Oh, God.
But I started to fight because I was living with my dad at the time, and he was just like, look, I don't want you ever starting a fight, but if somebody starts something, I better hear that you didn't do anything. So I was like, okay.
So you hit back hard.
I went into blind rage. So if you bottle it up too much, if you don't let it out at all and just at least shout at the person, you just suddenly wake up and you're just like, what's happening? And I remember choking out quite a few people not knowing. I mean, had long arms, hooray.
Yeah.
But it's not a pleasant thing, no matter what. But I will say you should defend yourself, but you should be smart about it. There's nothing wrong with knowing, like, where's the adult in the area?
Right.
What situation am I in? Can I outrun them? Could I even make sure that it doesn't even escalate in the first place? You know what I mean? Like, look at what Oscar does. He takes that one hit, they leave. And that, I think, is probably the wisest thing he could have done. Because he's got 3-1 odds.
In this scenario, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Right?
So, in Ellie's point, I mean, Ellie's also like a 200-year-old vampire who can rip people into pieces. So, I'm like, I get it, but at the same time, I do like how it ends up later in the film, although he does go too far. It's just more like, I mean, his aim is a little off. Maybe go for like a shoulder first or something.
Right.
But I just feel like that one person, who's the one picking on you? Because what they do so well in the scene with the twigs is it's Connie going, do it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all like, they look at Oscar like, I don't like hurting kids. I just laughed at jokes.
Yeah, I don't like you. I don't know that I actually wanted to physically hurt you, but now we're in this situation and I'm being peer pressured into hitting this child with a stick.
Yeah. Peer pressure is very, very real.
And as a kid, I'm just like, look at why you're being bullied in the first place. And if you're the smart kid, you need to use that to survive. That's my advice on that. But I do feel if that fist hits and you feel the rage, go ahead and use it. You know? Do what you got to do to get them off you. And just know what's going to happen next time you speak to an adult, though.
Right.
Because you're still wrong.
That's the thing, right? Like if you fight back, well, it's like, sorry, you're still gonna get in. I remember having like an assembly with like a group with my grade because someone got in a fight, and someone was like, because the teacher was like, you cannot fight, do not fight. Well, what if someone punches me? Am I just supposed to let them attack me? Do not fight back. Like they didn't say they just said do not fight back, and it's like that doesn't help though. So you're basically telling me, fucking take a bunch of hits. Right. Otherwise, if I fight back defending myself, even if it's self-defense, I'm going to get in trouble and possibly suspended or expelled.
Yeah.
I have been suspended, or almost. I've been paddled, been yelled at for fights and stuff. And yeah, the punishment systems in the schools, they will always be like, well, I'm sorry, but you participated in it. And I have to say, I still held my head high, just kind of going like, but I didn't have a broken kneecap that they were trying to break. I still was able to... For one, you get a little bit of respect from the person who's coming at you because you're not being just a punching bag.
Yeah.
That's what they're looking for. Are you even awake? But if they can take you, though, then they win.
I was so afraid of suspension or ramifications because I was like, oh my God, my parents are going to kill me.
Right.
And I probably could have been like, well, this is why it happened. But I was so afraid to tell my parents that I was being bullied because I didn't want them to know I was being bullied. So
yeah.
It was like a shame side of it for me.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
No,
I mean, we don't
happens.
ever get any insight into what Oscar is thinking about this. I think in the early part of the film, it never even occurred to him that he could fight back. He's just trying to avoid being in the situations where he could be in danger. Like, in a way, I almost admired this particular strategy. I'm going to stay late at school and hope like hell that they all just went home because I waited so long. Yeah. It doesn't work, but... as an adult, it's really frustrating to watch Oscar come home and his mom be like, oh, what happened to your face? And he's like, I fell on a rock. Yeah. And you're just like, or you could confide in her, even if she is an absent mom or you feel like that relationship isn't quite there. There's opportunities to try to ameliorate this situation because instead he just so overcompensates. And I will say, again, it's way worse in the book. He does the stick to the ear to Connie. But then later on, he actually sets fire to the entire classroom. Nobody's in there. He doesn't kill anybody, but he burns down an entire classroom.
Damn. And like, even to speak why he doesn't tell his mom, it's also just like, I mean, like, shame may be an aspect, but it's also like, what if my mother sees me the same way these bullies do? And it's such a weird, in hindsight, like unreasonable thought to have.
Oh, but at 12 years old, for sure.
And when when you are the result of constant bullying, like, you might think, well, what if my parents think the same? So it's better not to tell them.
And it comes down to reason again as well, because I mean, I think all three of us, we will definitely share the fact of like being queer at any level.
Yeah.
And you don't want to tell your parents that, especially if you hear any conversation they might have just out of concern.
Oh, yeah.
Why are they picking on you? What have you been doing?
Oh, yeah.
Or it's like, what are they saying to you? Well, they're calling me a lot of gay slurs.
Yeah.
Oh, well, why is that?
Why are they calling you that? Yeah. What did you do?
The final piece is potentially that even if someone like Oscar tells his mother, the possibility that they might then go to school and say something and it just makes it worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've had that.
Yep.
And I will say, though, again, younger listeners, if you have the relationship with your parents that you can talk to them about things, if you can tell that they're meaning well and maybe just not expressing themselves very well, try to bridge that gap a little bit because you do need to have some sort of protection unit. You're young, you're small, you're going to get hurt, okay?
Yeah.
And I wish I had done that a little bit more. I did it as I got older, because it was like, now it's too much. Now I'm just like, I've tried to fight my own battles here. They just keep coming. So I was like, hey, Mom, this is what's happening at school. Unfortunately, my mom is just like, what? And she would fight it for me. She's like, hey, you little shit, what are you doing to my kid? Yeah, so she would fight a parent if she had to. She'd fight a school board if she had to.
There you go.
But at my dad's, no, he'd just be like, well, let me tell you how to punch.
Right.
You know, he'd try to give me the skills to do it, whereas I'm like, I just want a parent right now.
Yeah, like I don't want to have to fight my own fights. I want it to be done.
I just want to go to school and learn. Oh, no.
God. Ugh. So Oscar ends up taking Ellie's advice. He goes to inquire about strength training from Mr. Avila.
There you go.
Who's played by Cayetana Ruiz. And I like Mr. Avila in terms of what he represents. And I also like the fact that he ends up just being another kind of well-meaning adult who cannot save Oscar.
Oh, no, yeah.
Mm-mm.
It feels more real to this world. Like, one of the things that I really came away appreciating from the film, but also informed by the book, is just how little anyone seems to understand about what is happening around them in this world, right? Like, they're surrounded by people all the time in this apartment complex, at the school, at the pool, and yet no one seems to know what's happening in anyone else's life. It's why Ellie can sneak into this world and be such a threat, because it's like, oh, I just moved in next door, but nobody knows who I am.
Exactly. I mean, this happens enough in the United States, and I'm sure Canada as well, but it's a very cultural thing. So just to point that out for anybody who may not be aware of it, like, again, I don't know a lot of Swedes, but I do know a lot of Scandinavians.
Mm-hmm.
Very stoic people, very mind your own business, and just non-confrontational whatevs kind of folk.
Mm-hmm.
So they're hard to read. They're really very low on that emotional scale. Okay. So even if Oscar were to flat out tell a teacher, like, hey, I'm getting my head cracked in all the time, they'd be like, huh.
That's interesting.
I guess we'll try to, we'll do an assembly, I guess.
Yeah, we'll pay attention to that. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. So the teacher actually, for being a Swedish teacher, is very... hands-on with his class, because they even say later when they're on the ice, like, oh, he's gonna freak out if he sees us try to do anything. Right. So he's very observant.
Okay, interesting. See, this is why the cultural context becomes so important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of cultural context, let's talk about some vampire lore, shall we?
Yes.
So this is where we learn a little bit more about Ellie as a vampire. Cats do not like them, as we learn when we go to buy some candy at this local vendor. And also, human food, not so good.
Nope. Just vomit it up.
Yeah.
Poor thing.
But I do appreciate that this is Ellie realizing, you know what, I could make a connection to this person. Like, I'm going to try. Sure, I'll eat your shitty looking candy, and then I'm going to puke it up, but at least I made the effort.
This also is where everything ties into that detail that we're missing from the book about Hakan being a pedophile and being older, because Ellie's choosing to hang out with Oscar.
Yes, it's Oscar over Hakan.
Yeah, and choosing to also put themselves in a lot of discomfort just to make sure that Oscar isn't sad.
Yeah.
I almost hate that I know that backstory from the book, Joe, and obviously it's not your fault, but it's like, because I can't...
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I can't see, because the film... You're right, makes the very wise decision to not have that be the case, because to answer your question from earlier, I do view this as a tragedy. Like, it is a romance, but like, it's also very, like, the way this movie ends, I find very depressing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's more so like, yeah, Ellie is realizing that they need to get a new handler.
Yeah.
So you think this is Ellie already grooming Oscar?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Oh my God. Thank you. Yes. Grooming. Oh, more grooming. Yeah, I would 100% always read it this way. And so I honestly don't know if I find Ellie's feelings for Oscar to be genuine or merely opportunistic.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it clearer in the book?
It isn't. We only get a couple of chapters from Ellie's perspective, and unfortunately a lot of the backstory about how they came to be. So how they came to be a vampire, not entirely clear. How they came to transition from boy to girl, quote unquote, is explicit. Basically, it involves being sold into child prostitution and then being castrated while being sexually assaulted. Oh, did I mention that the book is really fucking hard to read at times? Jesus. And then there's another scene later on where Hakan, after he has become a kind of Frankenstein's monster, tries to really aggressively sexually assault Ellie. So a lot of the chapters from their perspective are very much associated with trauma and violence.
Okay, that's what I was hoping for, because that's the thing I was getting from this. I knew the debate back when the movie came out too, was like, is this a romantic story, or are we watching like some sort of grooming? Yeah, it's a very good word. And I mean, could it not be both?
It could be both.
To a certain extent, because I think that there's definitely the opportunistic angle there of like, well, this is helpful, and I like the guy. Because I'm feeling that Ellie is probably seeing a lot of themselves in Oscar's trauma.
Right.
And being like, I'm not going to let this kid grow up to be me.
Right.
Well, but the fact of the matter is, though, that no matter what, and you're right, let's say it's both, but there is never a situation involving Ellie in which they are not seeking out another person for opportunistic reasons, because they will always need someone to help them feed.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even touched upon it, so this is week number 2 of talking about child vampires, but such a completely different character from Near Dark. And of course, we mentioned the Kirsten Dunst character from Interview with a Vampire. Ellie is a completely different beast, right? Has all of the strength and the maturity, but also trapped in a child's body and therefore can't get away with certain things. Like, I love the reveal that Ellie has a ton of money and can just pay for everything, but also I'm a fucking 12-year-old, so I can't rent an apartment. I can't just travel by train by myself because it draws suspicion.
Well, I would love to know what happens after the credits roll in this movie.
So there's actually a novella that addresses what happens when they get older, like after the fact, but we'll talk about it at the end.
Yes. Oh my God, I want to know.
Okay, so importantly to our queer reading, this is the moment where Ellie asks Oscar if he would like them if they weren't a girl. And of course, he's a 12-year-old boy who has a burgeoning crush. And he's like, yeah, no, of course, obviously, girl, I love you. And you're just like, Oscar, listen to the question. Read between the lines, Oscar.
It's 12. It's 12. There's no between the age of 12. There's just
but at least what we do get, I mean, compared to the book, is what happened to Ellie in the book was against their will.
Correct.
Whereas in the movie, it's ambiguous.
Yes. Yeah. And we'll talk about why that's important when we get the only reveal of this movie that confirms that this is a trans narrative.
Yeah. So this was the second thing that spoke to me when I did not even realize that until very recently, because this is something we explored, Trace, on my podcast
on Dead Girl.
It was that, in the last few years of really being around more like-minded folk and queer horror fans and trans horror fans and stuff, and actually hearing people out more, because I was kind of a piece of shit up until that point.
You're so hard on yourself.
No, you didn't know me. So I just really didn't listen to people who didn't have time for them. I had the whole I don't discriminate, I hate everybody. That shitty, contrarian attitude.
Right.
That's so metal of you.
But it really came down to I have felt and discovered more and more that I am not cis. I may present as such, and I'm okay with doing that, but it doesn't mean that I don't walk around with my own dysphoria and feelings and stuff. Right. And I've always had it, but I didn't really know what it was until I heard more people talking about it. And this movie always struck that chord with me with Ellie, because it's just kind of like the whole, what? But what are you? But how are you? And they're, Oh, I'm just gonna not think about that. For years is kind of what I did, but I kept being drawn to this character. And so then for me, it's just it's the two me's in a movie kind of talking to each other. So for me, I'm always really sad when I'm done watching this movie, but with that, it's that melancholy, the kind of sad with a smile kind of thing. Because it's it's representation, but it's the representation of you that's yeah, thank you for putting all my depression in a movie. But they did it so well. But yeah, so that scene has always really hit me with the whole, would you still like me if I wasn't a girl? And it's like, man, I've actually had that feeling, like, would you still like me if I wasn't a boy kind of feeling.
Right.
So it's so interesting. For me, at least. Like just hits on a particular level.
Well, that's really meaningful, Chandler. Like, thank you for sharing that, because to me, I'm just, I watch this as a cisgendered male and I go, oh, okay, so this is the film, if we're reading it through the queer lens, it's saying maybe Ellie isn't a girl. And of course, if you're reading it from a more conventional narrative perspective, you're like, oh, okay, well, Ellie's not a human being, so she's not a girl.
That's what I did at first.
But nevertheless, I mean, it's always an insight that, like, I mean, I confess when it comes to gender issues, I'm still learning and working through things, and there are times when we have discussions where I'm like, I feel like I'm on the outside looking in because I'm trying to not understand, but I guess relate to it more.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's just not, I mean, there's just a barrier at some point.
Of course.
because I am cisgender.
Well, yeah, because we can't live other people's experiences, so the best we can do is have these conversations or do research to better understand, like, there's been a lot of well done pieces about this film. I'm going to try to bring in somebody a little bit later about specifically the queer element of this. Okay. But it's tough, right? Like, I want to understand and be able to empathize with other people's experiences. And I hate the fact that this is going to sound weird. I hate the fact that I can't understand the full experience of what our trans colleagues are going through. And in some ways, I'm happy for it because a lot of it seems like it's rooted in pain. But also, I hate the fact that it feels like, as a cisgender gay man, a lot of my battles have already been fought, and I just get to live a life of privilege while I watch people that I care deeply fucking for getting their rights stripped away from them. And I'm like, I'm not under threat in the same way, and I fucking hate it.
But you have been.
I have been, but really not even in my life.
No, sure.
It's not even like, and it's not even just cisgender people who are awful, like the awful cisgender people, like that are doing like anti-trans stuff. I mean, like, I always forget, maybe willingly so, how many people in the queer community are transphobic. Like, I came across a Twitter profile because J.K. Rowling was fucking trending again, and I was like, why is she trending? Which I should have just known.
Just don't. Ugh.
But yeah, like, one of the replies is from a queer organization. It was called like LGB. And their mission, their goal, the organization's mission was to remove the T from LGBT.
That is their thing.
I was like, what?
Those people can go straight to fucking hell.
Oh, yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah. Honestly, I have no time or patience for people who aren't willing to stand up for trans rights, because it's like, that is where the fight is at right now. And if that doesn't concern you, then fuck you. You're done. I don't care to know you.
Wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. I also want to make clear, just for anybody who's like looking for, I guess, familiarity or, knowing who has shared experiences. Like, I'm not trans in the, more traditional sense. I know you're not saying that as just a clarification that, I also understand where you're coming from in this feeling of like, that barrier, right? Because I would identify more on like the gender fluid kind of scale, where I just kind of like go between. I just feel how I feel at any moment. And it does make me feel that more impostery kind of section of just existence sometimes when we get to these conversations, because it's like, I still don't have the same struggles.
Right.
I could be much quieter about it and just feel what I feel. And it's just more, if I wanted to talk openly with people, that's when I feel it, and it starts to kick in. But I all of my friends who are binarily transitioning, it just cuts me to pieces. Basically seeing what they have to go through and knowing what they have to feel, and just knowing like the percentage of how much I feel that way, right? Comparatively, so I'm there with you on that level too. So I do also understand that whole like outside looking in and going like, fuck,
Yeah.
And it's a nightmare. It's just a total nightmare, the way people treat each other.
Nevertheless, though, you even saying, it depends on how I feel. I feel this way one moment, I feel this way another moment. Like that to me is enough of an explanation to be like, okay, I get it. I mean, to an extent, I get it. That's enough. And it's always so surprising to me. I don't know why it's surprising that isn't enough for some people.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And it's not like you even know in that. I mean, maybe some people do, but for me, it's like, unless I'm thinking about it or somebody were to ask me how I felt in that moment, I would realize just how am I talking to somebody? How am I presenting myself physically? How did this image of this person make me feel right now?
Right.
Like, is there jealousy or is there attraction? I don't know. We're going to find out. And so it's like, well, it's like sexuality or dysphoria. We'll find out today on
Oh my God. On every day in the life of Chandler.
Yep.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Mrs. Chandler Bong.
Yes. Oh, many times in my life. You have no idea.
I'm sorry. I know you probably do get
And
that.
I grew up in the 90s, so thank you for that one.
I'm just going to bring us back to the film now.
Bringing
us back to the film. So, in case we realize, oh shit, we don't have any kind of real male role models in this movie, let's get introduced to Oscar's dad, Larry, who is played by, I'm going to say it's Palle Olafsson as opposed to Pale Olafsson.
Yeah, that's probably right.
It'd be Palle or Palle. Yeah.
Okay. In my notes, I just refer to him as Swedish Keanu Reeves, which is
it's
kind of weird and
This is
rude.
only seen in the movie, right?
He's got another one later.
He does, yeah. Because Oscar tries to hide out in the country after that incident in the bunker with Ellie.
Yeah.
So Oscar's dad, Larry, does live in the country, and this scene is just kind of like, it's a reprieve. Oscar gets to go and be a kid and just have fun out in the snow, and it's great. Okay, cool.
It's so cool.
And then we have to intercut this or jump back to the city so that we can see Haken preparing to do another murder, because it's like, all right, this is the world that we're living in. These things are happening simultaneously.
In a public fucking building, too.
Yeah.
Well, because he's desperate, right? Mm-hmm. So this is the equivalent of the grocery store scene with Richard Jenkins' character in the remake, where it's like, I didn't have time to plan for this. I'm kind of winging it. And of course, it just absolutely goes to shit. So Haken strings up this boy, but he's interrupted. The boy wakes up, his friends find him, and boom, we are disfiguring ourselves with acid in a change room.
I love the shot. It's before he does the acid, but when he's like sulking in the corner of the shower, and the wall dividing the rooms is like split dioptering the frame for us.
Yeah.
And we can see him cowering on the left side of the screen, while on the right side we have the boy and his friends like rescuing him.
Oh boy.
Also, how wholesome is it that this boy had friends who were just like, I'll get you out.
Yeah.
Right?
My friends would not have done that. They would have been like, well, enjoy sleeping over at the school today.
Hang on one sec. I'm just going to take pictures and post them to social media. We might even take off your shorts.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were my friends.
Yeah.
Who am I kidding? I didn't have friends. I was an Oscar.
Yeah, I would like to think I have someone that would come back and check on me.
Right? Yeah, like, where's Trace gone? We haven't seen him in a while. Holy shit, he's strung up in the change room. What is going on?
I know.
Okay, so Oscar ends up, returning back to the city. He's lifting weights with the coach. Of course, we're still being bullied, so he finds that his pants have been left in the urinal and he has to walk home in his shorts. This is just to confirm, hey, keep the bullying in front of mine, because Oscar never gets away from it unless he goes to his father's. So Ellie, meanwhile, has learned that Haken has been taken to the hospital because it's been reported on the news. So they go to the hospital. They question the nurse. The nurse is like, hey, you 12-year-old child, what are you doing here? Ellie immediately gets the information that they need. And then before this nurse can even figure out, shouldn't you have a parent around? Ellie has scaled the 7 stories up to Haken's room.
Okay, I wrote in my notes a handful of times, this should be on one perfect shot. The one was the dog staring at him when he's bleeding. Like, I love the composition of that shot. But yeah, it's just that shot of the nurse outside, like at the foreframe.
Yeah.
With the hospital wall at the back with Ellie, like just hiding there. It is so perfectly staged.
Yeah, the scope is massive, and it takes you almost a moment to realize not just that Ellie is on the wall, but how far up the wall they already are. And then, yeah, you're right, Chandler, when you described it's kind of like a spider. We just see them crawling up. I'm making a weird move that you can't see, but you know what I'm doing.
Podcasting, the visual medium.
Podcast, the video, the game show. Yes.
No, so cool. And have you ever seen a gecko like crawl up a wall?
Gross, disgusting. Fuck off.
Okay, well, but that is exactly, or like a salamander. That's exactly how they do it. Like
I don't need lizards of any kind in my brain.
Wow. That's just how they do it. They're like, and they're up. That's what happens.
I am like, blah.
I've learned a new thing that creeps you out today.
Are geckos the ones that are like the clear little baby things that like just run around your house? Because
your house, maybe you have an infestation if that's happening.
You're talking about silverfish, Trace.
I think so.
No silverfish. No. Won't go in an attic because of it. But no. In Texas, yeah, we always like the geckos. There's the little tiny clear ones that always try to get inside because of the Texas heat.
Yeah, exactly. They need a lot of moisture, so they always try to get out of the heat. Whereas a salamander is always just like hanging around on the outside of a wall because they like the sun.
Right. So. Yeah. I love the slight deviation into like Animal Planet for a moment.
Yeah. Right.
I cannot do frogs or lizards. I can do snakes if they're in captivity, but I cannot do frogs or lizards in any shape, way, or form.
Oh, you are so weird
you're
sometimes.
In Texas. Damn.
I know. In case you couldn't tell, I don't like camping, and I would not describe myself as outdoorsy.
This is true.
Well, Ellie probably was because of the way they scaled that building.
Right. Yeah, very adept at climbing, so off they go.
So this is great, though. This honestly works as a short film to me. Like, from Ellie getting into the hospital to Hakan's fall, like it's just wonderful.
It's like a perfect little 5-minute movie. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and honestly, this really like rams home the tragedy of this Hakan character. We don't know almost anything about him. You know, I think there's enough information in the film for us to infer that there's a weirdness or an unhealthiness to the relationship, but we don't know how long they've been together. We don't actually know. Like, I've actually seen people mistake the relationship or, oh, this is their father, like Ellie's father, which is not accurate. But I'm pretty sure that even after the first time I saw the film, I knew that it wasn't a healthy relationship because of the way that Ellie talks later on. But yeah, I mean, there is at least an affection here when Ellie can't come in because, of course, you need to be invited. And Hakan is just so eager to offer one last opportunity to connect with this creature that he's been caring for. And I don't know, it's sad and pathetic. And when you know the backstory from the book, at least, it's really fucking gross that he just wants to be touched by this creature one last time.
That's the thing. I prefer the movie reading, which again to me is Hakan was a child when they met, and you know we're just following a cycle here as Oscar replaces Hakan. And while I'm not saying I don't even like the pedophile approach that the book takes, I appreciate that he's using like challenging and very upsetting material. But not having read it, I can't speak to how it plays. But I just think poetically and thematically, what the movie does is better.
I like them both on that level, on the the more poetic level. I guess it's because I also like how the one of knowing Hakan's it was always older and pedophilic. It says a lot about Ellie as well. We are dealing with a monstrous creature, and they do explore this with later as we get with Virginia, and that power dynamic as well. The fact that Ellie will shout at Hakan and stuff. We're not dealing with just a child, like an adult in a child's body. You're dealing with a beast that has lived for a very long time. I will say the film does allude to the relationship between Hakan and Ellie, but only in one tiny, teeny moment in the movie. And that's early on when he asks them to not see Oscar anymore. Right. Yeah. And all they do is put their knuckles on his cheek, which is the same cheek I do believe that he burns off later, but just touches him. And he just is euphoric. Yeah. And just how much that was. And Ellie's just like, this is your kindness.
Yeah, like the contact is a thrill in and of itself because Hakan is so desperate for it. And yeah, like in the book, it's deeply uncomfortable because we're reading first person from Hakan's perspective. And he's always just anxious. He wants to know if they can sleep together and if Ellie will take off their top so that they can have like skin to skin contact. And you're just like, nope, this is pedophilia. Like, I'm having to live a pedophile's experience, and I fucking hate it.
I find that very interesting, actually. Not that you hate it.
No, it is interesting, but it's so deeply unpleasant. Like, you're
right.
gaining some insight, but you're just like, whoa, man.
Yeah. But Chandler, to respond to your point, though, you could also read that moment as they were once, when Hakan was a child, able to not consummate their love, because that's gross, but like show their affection more for each other. And he probably hasn't been able to do that with Ellie.
Yes.
Since he was like 16, probably. So he's lived his entire adult life in love with this thing that he hasn't been able to show affection for since they met when they were children. So I could read it the same way.
Yeah.
Sure, and you can also read it in a more traditional vampire sense as well, with a vampire and their thrall, very Renfield,
or their familiar,
as well.
Yeah.
But what you were just talking about, Joe, just also makes something make way more sense for me. Something that's never made sense to me was when Ellie disrobes for Oscar and crawls in the bed, and Oscar's like, "Oh, you're not wearing any clothes, and you're cold." That makes so much more sense, because Ellie's response to it too is kind of like, "You don't care? You don't really want this?" It shows a different relationship there.
Yeah, and it's also very clear in the book that Ellie is using it as a manipulation to continue getting Hakan to do what they want. So they will offer a touch, or like, yes, I will take off my top for a moment so that you can get what you need. Ellie is smart in that way. They know what they're doing.
They're 200 years old. They better be.
Well, but again, right? Like, sometimes 12, sometimes 200. All this to say, the shot of Hakan falling out of this window and then Titanic hitting the sign, it's horrifying and sad, and I fucking love it because it's also gorgeous.
It's so good.
It is. And him looking up into the stars, just lying there. Oh.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because this is like, this movie's almost 2 hours long.
Yeah.
We're over halfway done with the movie by this point, and like, I wouldn't even call this movie slowly paced, but it doesn't feel like a lot has happened compared to what's going to happen in the last 30 to 45 minutes of this movie.
Yeah. I think it's because there's so much anticipation. Like, in some ways, you know that all of the bullying is going to have to come to a conflict. You know that Ellie is going to have to be revealed to Oscar so that we can do a kind of traditional YA fall apart, come back together sort of deal. And this feels like a film that is so confidently paced. It's just saying, you know where we're going. Stick with us because we've got a banger of a finish.
Yeah.
Yep. You don't know where it's going.
You have no idea. Can I... when we get to this pool scene, oh my God. I was not prepared the first time I saw this movie. Not prepared. We're not there yet. Okay, so we have to spend like a brief period of time with Lackey, who awakens. He's in bed with Virginia, and he realizes that Jacques was attacked by a child. So he's starting to put the pieces together. What is the thing that changed in the community? Oh, right, that new family moved in. Yeah, so this is when Ellie then invites themselves into Oscar's bed for this little naked cuddle, and they once again remind Oscar that they are not a girl and that they can only be together as long as things remain the same.
Yeah. Ellie, can you please explain more what you mean when you say I'm not... this is a 12-year-old boy that you're talking to.
Like, you need to tell him flat out, this is what's happening, this is what I am, because...
Like, PowerPoint presentation, or I guess whatever the little rotating slide machine was back then.
Yeah. Can we spell it out in a microfiche, perhaps?
Yeah. There you go, microfiche.
So this is where I'm going to bring in a reference. So I think I've mentioned this person before on the pod. I can't remember where, but it's a blog called Fashionable Tinfoil Hats, written by Vry Kaiser. And Vry has written a piece called Let the Right One In is a Queer Vampire Story. And they specifically talk about this moment. Ellie is quite obviously transcoded in the fluidity of their presentation and rejection of binary gender descriptors, which is an exciting thing for trans readers. It's also deeply fraught because Ellie's gender is irrevocably tied to a mutilation which explicitly and implicitly robs them of choice. They had no choice in becoming a vampire, no choice in whether or not to grow up, no control over their body. They are symbolically robbed of gender by being forced to stay a prepubescent child, which is represented as being literally robbed of their genitals. So there's a lot there. And I should reference that this is actually more in relationship to the book, but anticipating the reveal scene in the film. Mm-hmm. The reason that I was drawn to this particular quote is because I've always applied a very black and white read to this text. Like, okay, so Ellie is a female presenting character who was once a boy. And when you start to read it as, especially when you bring in the backstory in the book about how it's revealed that Ellie was once Elias and that, yes, sold into sex slavery, castrated against their will. And Lindqvist, as an author, does a really weird thing in the book where we use she pronouns up until that reveal, and then the rest of the book, Ellie uses male pronouns.
So, okay. For the movie, because the only time I've seen vampires without or sans genitalia, it was in The Strain. And the book The Strain would come out the year after this movie came out.
Okay.
So whenever I saw this movie, I always just assumed it was like, for lack of a better phrase, that Ellie's genitalia just disappeared or fell off, depending on what it was. But that might be just because of The Strain feeding into my mind with that. So I never took into account like Ellie was castrated at one point prior to the events of the movie. I don't know.
It's also really hard for the film as well. I remember the first time I saw it too. It's just like, for one, it's just like, whoa, why was this relevant? Why are you showing me this shot of like the lower half of a naked child?
A mannequin, essentially.
Yeah, it was a mannequin, thank goodness. But still, it's just kind of like, I just remember it being like, okay, 2008, you had to have a shock moment in your movie, didn't you? That's kind of how it felt.
Yeah, I have seen people even be like, oh, this movie has a little sleepaway camp moment. And I was like, okay. Fuck.
Actually, I am getting some sleepaway camp vibes from a lot of different things, but for different reasons than most probably will.
Well, there's no camp here, right? Like, that's the big distinction.
For one, yes. Thank you. That is a very good distinction. But there's also, like, and I know you also probably mean camp on the tonal sense.
Yeah, there's no camp and there's no camp.
Yeah.
So very few hot dogs and pots in this movie.
Exactly. But, for instance, even just Lackey's character and how he's walking around is like, it's got to be this kid. Mm-hmm. I'm going to kill this kid. Really reminds me of the owner of the camp counselor of just like suddenly just on a switch, like, I'm going to kill a child.
Right.
That's it. It's going to like bare hand find this child and murder them. And then, of course, the very muddy, almost pseudo-trans allegory, but not really committing to it, kind of story. That's in there. But, of course, if you were to look at it as like one and one, oh, my God, they are the same. No. But I see why what people were picking up on.
Shared DNA.
Right.
Shared DNA. I love that. I do love that. But it is true on the first watch of the film, though. I think even a lot of viewers needed the same thing that we're saying the Oscar needs, which is the whole, like,
a PowerPoint presentation?
was once boy, is no longer presenting as boy.
Yeah. Please spell it out.
And so when adapting the screenplay, so they didn't really address so much the lack of an explanation for Ellie's backstory, like from page to screen. The reason that they didn't do the Hakan pedophilia stuff was because Alfredson was like, there's no way in this 2-hour movie we can devote enough time to satisfactorily handle a pedophilia subplot.
I get that.
So we opted to leave it out. And I was like, that makes sense. And I wonder if it was the same thing for Ellie's backstory. But then at that point, it begs the question, well, why have it in here at all?
Yeah, exactly. It's such a blink and you... I guess it's more fan service, I suppose. If you were a fan of the book, then you're like, see, it is well adapted.
Yeah.
These conversations happened around it.
I mean, I'll confess, I had a bit of an embarrassing moment back in the past where when Faculty of Horror covered this and they delved into the relationship between the book and the film, and they said, so we can look at this film as a trans or a queer narrative. And I said, oh, well, if you're going to bring in stuff from the book that's not really in the film, then I think you're like I was very...
There's the Joe that I know.
Fucking asshole me. And, I'm ashamed of thinking that because hello, I devoted an entire podcast to doing just that. But also, it's so tricky because I think the film, in a way, is actually playing it sly. And I apologize to this person because I can't remember where I read it. But Trace, I ended up sending you something that actually sees this as a positive thing, where you could look at Ellie as a person who was looking to transition and was able to do it in a way that they could, because if you look at this as a period piece, you're not going to be a 12-year-old child who gets to transition. And yet, if we look at Ellie as a person who wanted to present as female, but was born male, but could survive a transition because of vampirism, then all of a sudden this becomes a celebratory text.
I like that one. I like that one more.
But that's where the ambiguity of the film comes into play, right?
Absolutely.
Now, granted, do I think that that Lindqvist or Alfredson were taking a lot of that into consideration? No. but if you can find and subscribe to that positive reading in this film, then by all fucking means do it.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
And don't let anybody tell you that you are, because you're going by what's in the movie.
Well, and I think that's why the end of the film ends up having these multiplicity of readings, right? Like, you can just as easily say, oh, this is hopeful. We've got a pair of outcasts who go off and enjoy the world together, in the same breath as somebody could say, no, this is the saddest possible fucking outcome for Oscar ever.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the morning, Ellie is gone, but they have left Oscar a note, which is so beautiful in terms of poetry. To flee is life, to linger, death.
Yeah.
It kind of sums up the movie in a nutshell for me.
Yeah.
But you know what? We need to go on a field trip. So we're going to go to the lake. Everybody's going to be skating. This is where Oscar gets his one good whack in on Connie. And oh boy, is it satisfying to watch this fucker go down. Even as I'm like, it's a 12-year-old child. You need to rein it in.
No, fuck that. Fuck that. I mean, again, I want to see this kid's head ripped off at the end.
Yeah.
Fair.
Watching him cry is
so
exquisitely beautiful.
They're terrible people, but also this fucking kid deserved it.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
yeah, no.
I also, it's like this kid too, there's nothing about this kid other than his confidence that makes him a threat to anybody.
Right.
It's his posse do all the work.
Oh, yeah.
He's this frail little doe-eyed kid himself. I think Oscar could take him if he tried. And I love that, though. Those are most of my bullies, too. I had like one or two who I was like, oh, Christ, is the Terminator. But a few of them were pretty much just good at making you feel so worthless that you didn't even try. So, yeah.
And Connie's power is that he has acolytes who will do the hard work for him, right? Like, there's a reason he never gets his hands dirty. And it's the reason why, as soon as Oscar takes him down, nothing else happens. At least not until Jimmy steps in later.
Yeah.
We even see the power dynamic shift in a way that is just delicious, satisfying. I can have this meal every fucking day of watching this little ass bully be like, hey, give me your hat. Hey, no, I said I want... Why? Give me the fucking... Okay, well, he's not giving me the hat. I love that scene so much. It's like a few scenes later, but I just... Yeah, this is the moment that just shatters the entire armor that Connie has, and it's beautiful.
Right. Well, and I love, too, that this isn't the kind of big power move that it could be. Like, this isn't Oscar's moment to reclaim his authority and, like, potentially get torn down because Mr. Avila catches him in action or something. Like, this is the big moment, but then it's undercut by, oh shit, we just found a man's body over here where the preschoolers are. So you're just like, right, because we still have two stories going on. We've got this teenage bully story going, as well as vampires and bodies piling up in this small community. So Jacques' body is exhumed. Oscar gets into big trouble with his mom, but he's like, yeah, fuck off, I don't care. This is when he realizes Ellie's advice was great. So he feels fantastic. He invites Ellie down to this bunker and proposes a blood pack. And it does not go well. And this is one of the very clear instances where we see the transition to the older actress as Ellie hops onto that floor and just licks up that blood.
Yep.
So they end up running away, and because they have tasted blood and they are super hungry because their familiar is dead and they haven't fed in a little bit, unfortunately, Virginia, who has stormed out of Gusta's place after Lackey drunkenly insulted her, blah, 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 adult drama, she's in the wrong place at the wrong time, and we get this gorgeous shot of Ellie just falling on top of her.
Yeah. It is so Cool.
Oh boy, that is terrifying because
Like a
she is just
spider.
walking home.
Like a big ass spider is what they do. You're walking.
Mhm.
No, you're on me. I
God,
love
Chandler,
that
so much
imagery.
spider talk on this episode.
Sorry,
It's that weightless leap that they do
Yeah.
that we saw from them earlier. It's so good.
Yeah. And this is where, sometimes it's easy to forget that Ellie is super powerful and capable of a lot of destruction. And then we get these kinds of scenes where it's like, oh yeah, they just took out a full-grown woman in clear sight of everybody because Lackey is right behind Virginia and basically boots Ellie off of her and then, takes Virginia to the hospital and so on.
Yeah.
So the next morning, Virginia has begun to... Sorry, he doesn't take her to the hospital. He takes her to bed. And
Which, mistake number one.
right? I get that she doesn't seem too torn up, but she does have a fairly substantive hickey on the neck. Sadly, yes, because we didn't go to the hospital, we don't run any tests, so Virginia begins to change the next day. She discovers that she burns in the sun, and she basically just wants to stay in bed. But, there's fun audio stuff where she can hear everything, and she's very sensitive.
And again, going back to the sound design, the sound of her peeling the bandage off of her neck is very gross.
Yep.
And then, she sniffs that blood, and she's like, I might like that.
Yeah. So in the book, she actually spends a couple of days and it's almost like she's going into withdrawal from drugs. So there's a bunch of really uncomfortable scenes where she will cut herself so that she can drink her own blood, but she starts to realize over time that it doesn't actually satisfy her. And that's when she has to leave and go and find a victim.
I am happy they sped it up in the movie. Yeah. I mean, it's cool, but time is taken.
Yeah. So once again, we're sort of cross-cutting between these two parallel narratives. So Oscar has sought refuge with his father in the country. And I'm curious about this because I never caught on to it until this most recent rewatch. It's very much presented that Oscar's dad is a drunk, and Oscar doesn't like it when this friend comes over and they start to drink too much. So the simple read is, Oscar loses his dad to this friend. Mm-hmm. Do y'all get a bit of a queer vibe from this friend showing up, and all of a sudden it's very chummy and...
I'm not saying no, I just didn't really consider it, and I don't remember the scene well enough to make a statement on it.
Okay.
I mean, I watched it right before we started recording, and I didn't in the moment without you mention it. The quickness with which the father is like, grabs the vodka. Mm-hmm. But Oscar's like, we were playing a game. He's like,
yeah, kid, you're dead to me.
Yeah.
This dude's here.
Oh.
He coaxes his own child to be like, but let's be friendly to my guest, who's way more important than anything we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the smile on the guy's face, I can see it. I didn't find it overt, but I think that reading can easily be applied.
Yeah. Like in the book, it's very just, he's an alcoholic, and the mom had enough of it, so this is the best he could do. Like he moved out because it's cheaper to live in the country and so on. But the film definitely. It has a little bit of that, because we're seeing it in a visual medium, you can kind of infer some glances in the way that it works out. But one way or another, Oscar decides to bail on his dad in the middle of the night. So he hitches a ride back to the city. And at the same time, this is when Virginia is going to Gosta. And it's really mean. Gosta's kind of an outcast among the adults who go to the bar in the book. And she basically just picks on him because she's like, well, nobody will really miss him all that much. He's just the dude with all the cats.
It's interesting, too, we have a male character with all the cats, because you don't see that very often.
True.
Not in North America.
Ooh, yes. Gotcha.
Fair.
So, needless to say, this does not go well for Virginia, because as we know, the cats do not like vampires. So, cue the CGI army of cats, and she gets taken to the hospital.
It really is, I mean, I don't want to harp on this too much, but it really is surprising that as precise as Alfredson is with every single shot of this movie, that this, he couldn't find a better way to do this scene.
Yeah. It feels like it's crunched. just a little bit.
Yeah, I wonder if it was either budget or, we didn't have time, or we thought we could do it and we wrapped the film and we send it off to post-production with the FX team, and this is what they come back with.
I don't know, but they have, like, puppets as well, because they wanted to get that thing that cats do when they want to bite you all aggressively, how they, like, rear their head back and chomp. So they have this little animatronic at her ankle, is like, and goes into it, but I just felt like, like I said early on in our recording, is like, you've had older movies do way more effective than just jump shots between real cats.
And see, Joe, and like, not to go all the way back to Piranha, but like, that's why, like, because I know I tend to be more forgiving of bad CGI than you do, but in a movie like this, I am less forgiving of it because everything else around it is like not lending itself to shitty, cheesy CGI as opposed to something like Piranha.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense, because I find when I think about this film and the American remake, the big detractors are these two big moments of FX work that just don't work because they're not seamless in the way that the rest of the film is grounded.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like if we were doing FX shit all the time, we probably wouldn't care, because it'd be like, yeah, okay, this is what the rest of the film is.
Yeah, that's true.
So, so I'm just going to dedicate a portion, even though in the film it continues to kind of intercut between stuff that Ellie is doing and the Virginia Lackey stuff. We're just going to deal with the Virginia Lackey stuff so we can be done with it.
Yeah.
So I have these tender moments as he talks about, like, the life they wanted to have together in the hospital, and she is like, I'm infected and I want to die. So she basically gets him out of the room so that she can self-immolate by getting this poor orderly to open the window. I love that this woman also goes up with Virginia. Like, bitch, you couldn't even let her get out of the room?
Well, and again, we get that wide shot that's so beautiful as she goes up in flames. Is this done equally as good or better in the remake? Because I don't remember how this plays in the remake.
It is about the same, except that the nurse doesn't get caught in the damage.
Boo.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of prefer it because I was just like, I mean, you can't blame Virginia. She doesn't actually know what's going to happen. She just knows that it's going to kill her. I don't think she realized she was going to set the entire fucking room on fire.
I'm happy that she did, though. I think it's one of the most gorgeous shots.
Oh, yeah, so cool.
Like, isn't it funny that we're highlighting all these moments of violence and we're like, this shot is so fucking good?
I mean, it is my thing.
Right. Chandler's like, this is my brand, so
welcome to my podcast, everybody.
Yeah, if you like this, head on over to The Beauty of Horror.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so let's jump back to Ellie and Oscar. So when Oscar returns, he actually goes directly to Ellie, and they end up spending the night. So this is when Ellie reveals that they're actually rich. At school the next day, Oscar sees that Connie is actually the victim of bullying from his older brother Jimmy, who is played by Rasmus Lethander. And then, we get this fantastic demonstration later by Ellie about what happens if they're not invited in. And I feel like this is the moment that the film really tries to sell itself in all the promotional materials. But even, like, I think the trailer, this is like one of the big standout moments.
Well, and so a detail about this. So, this is apparently a key passage in the novel. Alfredson actually wanted to omit this from the film.
Oh.
What? Lindqvist was adamant that it had to be included. And Alfredson was nervous about the scene, but he realized in post-production that the sound effects and music made it American in a bad way. That's a quote. It had to be removed for the scene to work. But the end result, which obviously shows Ellie slowly beginning to bleed from their eyes, ears, and pores, received positive notices from many critics. So even in the film, like in the final cut, he was still like, I don't really want this in there.
Right.
But then it got a good reception.
Yeah. The interesting thing about the book and the film, the Swedish version, is that Ellie bleeds from everywhere. So as you said, it's their pores. And in the American version, they really water it down so that it's like basically orifices. So it's eyes and nose and ears. And there's just something so much more ominous about the idea. Like in the book, you're getting passages where their entire shirt is getting covered in blood because they're seeping out of like their arms and stuff. And
the close-up of Ellie's scalp in the movie, that's the one that gets me where I'm like,
yeah.
So
good.
In the stage play, so for me, Yeah, that final scene is really impressive, especially knowing, learn how to snorkel and all the things that you need to do for it. But this was the most visually impressive thing because I was sitting there the whole time like, there's no way.
Yeah, they can't do it.
No way you're going to... And they freaking did. I mean, it depends on the night, how well the wig and stuff looked, but they do such a good job of slipping it on to the actress that's playing that you don't even really notice it. And then as she steps in, like, I don't know what she was... I think she had like a hose in her hand.
Right.
And was squeezing something. Kind of like those old Scream masks that would bleed.
Oh, with the bleed, the knives even.
Yeah. And then she had, blood capsules and stuff to have it coming out of her mouth, but like just pouring all over her face so she could like tilt her head back and get it into her eyes to make it look like it's coming out of her eyes. Like the choreography was phenomenal to make that work real time. The audience were just like, what the fuck is going on?
And Joe, that's beautiful. What you were saying too about like horror being adapted to the stage, because like, you don't see like action movies be adapted to the stage, but horror is the thing. It's like there's effects work going in there, and so it's like part of the fun of going to see that is just see how are they going to capture this 100%. In real time on stage in front of a live fucking audience. It's magical. So yeah, if Let the Right One In tours in your neighborhood, anyone go see it.
Oh my god, you two are selling this on me so hard, and I'm really jealous. Important to note, too, that after Ellie... I mean, again, we could argue that this is Ellie trying to sell themselves to Oscar, saying, okay, you wanted the slideshow, you wanted the microfiche reveal, this is what I actually am. But I love that they follow it up by saying that they're not evil. They just do what's required of them to live.
Which is like innate animal instincts, right? Like that's just going back to like just basic needs.
But also to me, I'm like, okay, but that is so fucking queer. This is who I am. I can't control it. This is what I have to do to live. This is me. It's my authentic self.
Meanwhile, I'm sitting here like, you've been alive for 200 years. I think you can die now.
Oh boy, I could not imagine being 12 for 200 years. Like,
no, it sounds horrible.
So Ellie gets cleaned up, and Oscar briefly, yes, this is when we get the reveal, the secret reveal. This is also the moment that Lackey's starting to put things together. So after Ellie and Oscar have spent the night together, Lackey arrives in the morning because he has realized what he saw was Ellie jumping on Virginia, and so he is there to kill them, but instead Ellie just immediately takes him into the bathroom and takes care of him. And we do get a bloody kiss here when Oscar says goodbye.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is good, but again, at this point, I'm like, I don't care about this Locky stuff anymore. Like, let's move this on.
And they do.
Yeah, important to note that when the remake does this, this is the Elias Codius detective character, because there is no Lackey character, because they get rid of a lot of that shit.
Very American.
Well, it makes more sense, but at the same time, I'm like, I hate having cops in my horror movies.
Me too. Me too.
Oh yeah, there's whole scenes in the American remake where he's showing up to the Richard Jenkins Hakan character being like, we're going to find out who you are, we're going to fingerprint you, we're going to facial ID you, and I'm just like, snooze.
God, yeah, no.
Okay, so Oscar goes home after having spent the night out somewhere after having abandoning his dad and not telling his mom, so she flips out, and this is basically also when Ellie is saying, okay, I can't be here anymore, so they have left by cab, and Oscar cries, and then he gets a phone call from Martin. Martin is one of Connie's bully friends. He's played by Michael Erhardson. And Martin says, hey, we've been missing you. Are you going to come to training tonight? Because we'd really like to see you. You should definitely come. It's absolutely not a trap.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I think Oscar's feeling a bit vulnerable, so he decides he is going to go, and this enables Connie and his older brother Jimmy, as well as the others, to execute a plan. They set a dumpster on fire to draw Mr. Avila away, and then Jimmy orders Oscar to stay underwater for 3 minutes, or he will gouge out his eye.
This is horrific. Like... Okay, a twisted part of me wants him to just fucking do it so I can see the repercussions that happen to this kid.
Like, you want him to disfigure Oscar so that Jimmy just gets everything coming to him.
I guess Do y'all think he would have actually done this?
I 100% think he would have done
100%.
it. 100%.
Yeah.
Okay. We haven't seen this character, but well, we have, but it's like briefly before.
Barely, yeah.
But it's the thing where I'm like, I guess he doesn't care about any consequence. My mind cannot wrap around this fact. It's like, dude, you are gonna go to jail if you stab this kid's eye out.
Mm-hmm.
Except, like, I get the vibe this is a dude who is into a lot of crime shit, you know. The fact that Connie gets really uncomfortable at that moment, I was like, oh, I just wanted you to scare the poor boy. You know, maybe make him get some water inhalation, but, whoa, yeah, you know what? You're my older brother. I can't say no to you. That's the weight.
Absolutely. In the book, the Jimmy character is actually named something else, but he's not only involved in like local gang activity, so he does have a bit more of a sullied reputation. Mm-hmm. Remember how I mentioned how Oscar lit the classroom on fire? Mm-hmm. So it turns out that the Jimmy character and Connie, they have an estranged father, and they only have like one picture of him, and it gets destroyed in the classroom fire. So they're feeling extra vindictive that Oscar has basically ruined their family relationship.
I kind of like that, but at the same time, well, do I need to feel any understanding for these bullies anymore? Not really.
I like this more. A lot. In fact, he kind of reminds me of, I forget the character's name, but the kid in It is chasing them all down.
Oh, Patrick Hockstetter. No. Henry Bowers.
Yeah. How in the book, Henry Bowers is just like carving his name into people's stomachs and stuff.
Yeah.
That's the level of like fucked up, I own this town that I feel from Jimmy here. And I like that. Again, this is a movie that it makes things feel a bit more real, especially from the eyes of a child. So if ever you've been in a situation where you're just like, who the hell are you? And they're like way worse. Mm-hmm. Or you don't even know that you're hanging around somebody that is like on the FBI's wanted list and stuff like that. You know, I love that he just kind of shows up, and then, you know, you learn a little bit about Connie, but the big takeaway here is like this world is intricate, and Oscar has no idea what he's stepping into. So Ellie's advice, for instance, is what I mean, be smart. Know your shit before you throw that fist at a kid, because you don't know.
You don't know who their older brother is.
Who's in their social circles.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm telling y'all, and again, I said this earlier, because I feel the same way about Carrie. I want them to look at him and be like, oh my God.
We fucked up.
Yeah.
This creature is doing this to us because of you. I'm so sorry. Please. I want them begging for their lives. Again, in Carrie, where I'm like, I know all these kids are fucking dying, but I want them to look at Carrie and be like, oh my God, she's the one doing this. Carrie, please stop. I want that. And I know we don't have time for that shit, but
you want the begging. You want the moment of like realization.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe y'all don't need that catharsis, but like that moment of realization provides so much catharsis for me. But I guess that's more, you're gonna get that in a revenge film, which this isn't really a revenge film, but still.
Carrie kind of is, though, so I do agree with you that, like, and also I guess it's just them being a little bit older and being a bit more autonomous in their actions. Like, they're getting over that hump of puberty where it's like, okay, the hormones aren't making you do everything anymore. You're just a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
You know? So with Carrie, I agree. I would have loved for some people to be like, well, we had this coming. Whereas in this movie, I kind of like that we get to see just how vicious Ellie can get without them showing it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
What did they see?
The feet dragging across the surface of the water is so good.
From a clearly dead body, too, because it wasn't kicking nothing.
No.
Ugh.
That moment was honestly revelatory to me. I didn't know what to expect. You know it's going to come to some kind of violent end, right? Like, the minute that we see them light the garbage fire, as soon as we see Martin call him, we know it's going to go bad. And it's just a question of who's going to save him, because at this moment, we honestly do think that Ellie could be gone. And I just remember thinking, what if this movie ends with Oscar getting an eye gouged out? Like, what if there is no happy ending for him? And then you think, well, okay, well, we'll see what happens regardless when his head comes out of water. And then it doesn't happen because we're too busy suddenly realizing, oh, there are feet there. Oh, that's a head. Oh, that's a hand. Holy fucking shit. This movie came to play.
It did. And then the stage play, now we can come to it. The way they do this is just, it's a smaller tank. They really just focus in on Oscar's viewpoint here. So they just have a tank that's big enough for the kid to be in. but they all have the scaffolding that they've been using throughout the entire film to get that height that we've been talking about, have Ellie up above him a lot throughout the film. So they just put a curtain over where everybody is up there, but they do have them up there to show you from Oscar's perspective what it's like to look up at these kids doing these things to him. And then you do have the older brother hold his head down and he holds his breath. Mm-hmm. They cover everything. And so I don't know how they switch it out. It's like a magic trick. That hand is on him the whole time. You see them push him in. Mm-hmm. And they said they learned a lot of illusionist stuff to do this. So you see him push him in, they put the curtain over him, and you just see like the foot fall in. And you have like blood splash and you hear all the screaming, and then the hand just detaches.
Wow.
It's so good. I don't know when they switched the hands, but it's so good.
It's I would say movie magic. Oh my god.
Well, kind of is, right?
It is though. Yeah, on stage they use proper movie magic to kind of trick you, and it's wonderful.
It's so good.
I love that. It's like, I came for a show, but I also got an illusion act.
Yeah. Just a little one.
Harry D'Amour would be proud. So Oscar eventually realizes that he is not being held underwater anymore. He surfaces and Ellie's bloody face is waiting to greet him, as well as everybody is dead except one character. I think it might be Martin. Who could care?
No, it's not Martin.
Wait, is Martin the one that was that like called him there?
Yes.
No, he's definitely dead.
Okay. He's very, very dead. It's the blonde one.
Yeah,
I don't think they named it.
He's just sitting crying on the bleachers while all these decapitated bodies are around him.
Mm-hmm. So important to note, in the American remake, it's far less satisfying because only the Jimmy and Connie characters get killed. And you're just like, no, I need all of these kids to be murdered.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
scarred up.
I'm actually okay with just the brothers getting killed.
Really? I don't even know you. Who are you? What is your thought process here?
Only because I love the idea of these other two that maybe they're still horrible bullies, but they're not as bad bullies, being traumatized for life.
Oh, so you want them to have the long game.
Absolutely. I mean, like, the fact of the matter is, remember we're talking about killing people for revenge. Getting your head ripped off, that's a pretty easy out.
Fair.
I also like the story they're kind of telling with it, too, because although I do think Martin does deserve it in this movie, Martin. So if you go back to when they're thwacking Oscar with the stick.
Right.
That blonde one was the first one to get the hits, and they have this non-committal kind of like... on his boots. They're just kind of like, on his jeans. And then they give it to Martin, and he's just like, should I? And Connie kind of nods, and that's when you get the one hit on the cheek. So Martin has drawn blood. Right. Martin has participated. It just Martin kind of pusses out there at the end. Whereas this one kid is just like, I don't know, man, I'm just hanging out with you because you're scary.
Right.
Basically.
I thought we were just going to play like Super Nintendo after this. I didn't realize we were hanging around here so that we could beat this kid.
Your brother gets pizza. I had different priorities today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, boy. So at this point, the film is nearly done. We repeat the opening scene, so we're back to a black sky with white snow falling, and then we transition, and suddenly it's day. Suddenly we're inside a train car. We're on the move, and Oscar is, in a train. He's seated with a large trunk, tapping out Morse codes to Ellie inside, and this is where we leave them. They're on to destinations unknown, onto a life that we don't know. We have no idea what, if anything, Oscar told his mom. The future is completely uncertain.
All right, so novella, what's up?
Okay, so I don't know the specifics because it's actually really hard to track down, but I can tell you that it's set in the future when Oscar is older, but he has been turned into a vampire. So it's a lot more hopeful and romantic because you get the idea that they will grow old or not together.
See, I was getting the vibe. Okay, I remember when it first came out, the discourse on that and the debates that I had with a lot of my friends. And the more I've watched it, the more I felt like the both kind of angle, just because the one detail there that's in the film, so this is not considering the book at all, is just that we see, like I said, the back of the hand for Hakan. And he's like, and that's enough. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Oscar, they're talking to each other through Morse code and communicating. Mm-hmm. Do you know what they say at the end of the movie? What they're actually, using Morse code to say?
I always assumed it was like, are you doing okay? Or I love you.
No. Because you could obviously use Morse code to figure it out. And it's, this is hilarious. It just spells out puss. But apparently in Swedish, that means small kisses.
I knew that from the Wikipedia plot.
Okay. Yeah. So it's like kiss, kiss that they're doing for each other. And I'm like, that is so amazingly sweet. Hell, the first thing we ever see him, they even put it in the subtitles. So one thing they put in subtitles to show that he gets interrupted. First thing he ever says to Ellie is sweet dreams.
Right.
Aww.
So they say like really nice little sweet things to each other. And we don't see Ellie interact with anybody this way.
That is true. Yeah. It kind of torpedoes our assertion that Oscar is being groomed for a terrible life of committing murders for this 12-year-old vampire.
That has to happen too, though.
but it makes more sense in the book, given that you know exactly what Hakan's relationship with Ellie is.
Mm-hmm.
In the movie, though, it's because we don't.
I think we have to infer it, though, don't we? Like, isn't that the default reading that, there's this hopeful optimism because Oscar is so young and he feels like he's found someone who truly understands him and is going to protect him. But as any kind of adult would know, he's basically signed up for a life of indentured servitude.
True, but I guess the difference here, and this is inferring from the film as well, is that Ellie has never given Hakan any of that. It's pure just, I'm in the room with you. It's a one-way infatuation, and Ellie's preying on it. Whereas with Oscar, that first line, I can't be friends with you. It's just a whole, I like this kid already, and I don't know why, and I don't want to move on.
Right, they've warmed to him in a different way than they had with Hakan.
Yeah, and Ellie's also kind of vulnerable, because as you say, the film ends with what we can assume is the beginning of Ellie's story.
Yes.
At the start of the film, it's running away from something, and it's all messed up, and then you have this kid, you're like, I'm just passing through, kid. Don't even talk to me. And then Oscar's just kind of cute about things, and Ellie's like, so why are you, stabbing trees and looking all sad? You want to talk about
what's
that?
Your deal, kid?
Yeah. Oh, crap, I'm getting involved. Damn it, I said I wasn't going to do this again. And I quite like that reading as well, where you can have a both situation where it's like, poor Oscar, you've got a pretty fucked up life ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
And but I did, it kind of has that what we do in the shadows thing of the series of how Guillermo's constantly like, please make me into a vampire. And I got the feeling that Ellie would be the one to be like, well, that's what this is all about.
Right.
You know?
Huh. I just love too that, the film gives us always enough for us to understand what's going on and maybe even anticipate, but also it doesn't really give us too many answers. Like, it's just not interested in doing that, and this ending is perfectly on point for that, right?
But that makes it so much more fun and easier to make any reading and accept any reading of this film. So again, we'll always accept most readings, but it's easier for me personally if the film is more ambiguous like that.
Yeah.
But that is Let the Right One In. Any more thoughts you want to get out here? Chandler, as the guest of honor, you can go first.
Oh, well, thank you. It's just such a beautiful, powerful film. I liked that what you already mentioned with its reception as well, that it's considered in the top list of cinema, you know? So I just think that if anybody who hasn't seen this one and they know, maybe you've seen the American remake and it's good, it's decent, I would not give it that sort of an accolade. But Matt Reeves did direct the hell out of that film.
Yeah.
But it's just, there's something special about this one. It was at the time when Swedish cinema was just kind of blowing up everywhere and, warping people's minds. It was like, oh my God. And for a good reason. So I just think that the ambiguity in this film is so on point. I do feel that there's an intentionality behind it, and I think that's what makes it so special, is that it's not a situation where you have a director copping out by going like, it asks questions, doesn't it?
Right.
In this case, I think there are a finite amount of answers that you can apply, and it's just kind of a pick your or choose your own adventure story. And on top of that, it's just a wonder to behold for a film.
Yeah. I really, really like this film. It's only the second time I've seen it. I saw it back when it came out, and I liked it. But 22-year-old Trace was like, yeah, it's good.
22-year-old Trace strikes again.
But I still gave it a 3.5. But I bumped it up this time, and I really appreciated the cinematography so much more in this round.
Right.
Like that really, really, really hammered this movie home for me. But yeah, no, I agree with everything y'all were saying. I really like it.
Yeah. it's so impressively beautiful and kind of understated. I think it offers us an alternative to the louder, more bombastic, sort of traditional American way of doing things. And that's not to throw any shade at Matt Reeves, but like he does insert more US style violence in his adaptation. And he makes some interesting creative visual decisions in terms of his direction. But something I love about this movie is how slow and deliberate and just, cold and romantic and sad it is. I find it's a really emotionally evocative film. And for all of those reasons and many, many more, this is actually one of my, probably top 10 favorite horror films of all time. I just think that there's so much to discuss and appreciate about it.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, before we announce what we're covering next week, Chandler, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
Sure, yeah. Most social medias, you can find me under my name, Shockaholic, which is kind of like my company name, but you have to do it specifically. So for Twitter and for Instagram, it's @_Shockaholic. It's just one word. And of course, there is my podcast that is The Beauty of Horror, which is @BeautyHorrorPod on most social media platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Also, thank you for coming on to this. This has been a wonderful discussion on this film.
Yes.
Thank you. My pleasure and delight, really.
Well, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram @HorrorQueers. Join our Facebook Horror Queers group to hang out with other listeners, or, as we said earlier, maybe non-listeners.
There we go.
Also, find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. Go to our YouTube channel to see our monthly Horror Queers hangouts, where we chat various horror topics with some of our peers, and of course have interviews with some filmmakers.
Right.
If you have a moment, please rate and review us on Apple Music or Spotify. And if you want even more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. We are now in April, so go subscribe to get episodes on Robert Eggers' The Northman, Adrian Lynn's Return to the Erotic Thriller with Deep Water, and a special 10th anniversary minisode on Joseph Kahn's Detention. Oh, and for its 25th anniversary, we will have an audio commentary on Anaconda.
Yes, God. Baby bird, it is time.
That's that little bit puffet, my little baby bird.
boy.
Joe, what are we talking about next week? And oh my God.
So this is a hard left turn. After 2 weeks of moody, beautiful vampire films, we are hitting Hollywood, Trace. We're going to go into film noir animation territory. I'm feeling a little Robert Zemeckis love, so we're going to talk about Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Joe, I haven't seen this movie since I was a child because this movie scared the shit out of me when I was a child.
Oh my God. Yes.
You know how I am with weird animation when it's like claymation, stop motion? I feel similarly about combining animation with live action. So
interesting.
I'm interested to see how I feel about this movie with 25 years of separation.
Yeah, this was a childhood mainstay. I watch this movie all the time. I fucking love it. And I'm so eager to revisit Christopher Lloyd's drag performance as Judge Doom.
And who can forget Kathleen Turner's vampy Jessica Rabbit?
Oh my God. I fell in love with a voice as a 6-year-old boy.
But until next week, everyone, we can cross out Let the Right One In.
Indeed, and cross out horror queers.
Atlas Avenue, a long stretch of road that encompasses everything the city of Kennett Heights has to offer. Neon lights, traffic, crime, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and the craziest of characters. My office was above it all. My name is James Locke, and I'm a PI.
Hello, Mr. J. How the hell you doing today?
Good, Edith. Nearly every year I have a new case. New people to meet, new clues to discover, and new problems to solve. But I do it the old-fashioned way. No technology. Nothing post-1950. Hell, I don't even listen to podcasts, but you should. Atlas Avenue Beat is a spoof of the film noir genre with goofy characters, tons of wordplay, and non-stop raunchy humor. There's also 3 whole seasons out right now with more on the way. Just search for Atlas Avenue Beat wherever you listen to podcasts or visit us online at bloody.fm.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.